have the pleasure and the honor to be here to kick off International Women's Day. So I can't believe I'm just coming down the end of my 1 year. It's been great for me. It is a great team that I work with here. Becky has done a fantastic job. What I'd like to do, if I could, have the Women in Law section. Anyone here who's part of Women in Law, just to stand up and be recognized with a nice round of applause for helping us, for being our largest section at the Bar Association. So thank you so much. This is the 9th summit, and really to celebrate women in this profession as well. Just a couple nights ago, Jan Roller had an opportunity to speak at an event that I was just being the moderator, like Kari's going to be in the next part of the agenda. And she spoke about the barriers that she had to face as a woman coming into Cuyahoga County and having an opportunity to be in front of judges and lawyers, and how demeaning and disrespectful judges were, and lawyers, men lawyers who she had to face. But she continued to put on her boxing gloves every day and to find herself where she is today, and as successful as she is today. And really, this agenda and this International Women's Day is really a celebration of many individuals, like many of you who are in this room as well, who are cutting edge, moving forward in the industry that you're in as well. Two things that I wanted to note. One would be for our board. So can I just see, I see a few of the board members that are part of our CMBA board. Can I have just, I think I saw 2 or 3 of the board members. Come on, stand up. Ronnie, where are you? 2, 3, 4. And thank you. So I wanted to point out that our board has 34 members, and of the 34 members, 20 are women. So, and then throughout today, I think you're going to get Barbie trivia. So I get to kick off the first Barbie trivia for today. So those of you, I won't ask you to raise your hand, but those of you who have bought Barbies or had an opportunity to understand a little bit about Barbies, well, how many have seen the movie, right? And then how many have seen it twice? Okay, I'm the second too. I had to go back because I want to make sure I got the message. My wife and my daughter were like, why are you coming to this with us? So I enjoyed it though. As I said, I have 6 sisters, and they always said I was the 7th. So I was okay with that. I don't have a problem. All right, so here, Mattel, they always have a new career of the year. So some of you would know that. And so that's for a Barbie each year. The reason they have a career of the year is they're looking for where there is a lack of women representation. And so that's the career of the year. So in 2019, right, the year before COVID, does anyone know what the career of the year was? Lawyer Barbie? Close. Judge Barbie, yeah. So at that time, 1/3 of the sitting judges, state court, which was where I sit, state court judges, only 1/3 of them were women. So in 2019, Barbie was the judge, was the career that was selected for the year. And I will say this, when I started over 20 years ago on our bench, it was pretty similar on our bench. I will say that over the last few years, we've either had equal amount, sometimes more of the women judges than men. Today we have 16 of the 34. So almost 1/2 of our judges are women judges as well. So. And with that being said, thank you so much again for spending your Friday afternoon with us, and for a cause that's exciting for us as the Bar Association, again, to celebrate for the 9th year. And with that, Kari Burns is going to come in and talk about what I think our next presentation as well. So thank you all.
Thank you, Judge Russo, and thank you all for being here this afternoon for our 9th Annual International Women's Day Summit. My name is Kari Burns. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at the Bar Association. I am also the first moderator for the panel, so there's your introduction of me. I do want to take a minute to thank some of our sponsors. We'll be thanking them throughout the afternoon. Our first group is Nuremberg Paris, our signature sponsor. Thank you so much for your generosity and donation today. Franz Ward is a break sponsor. And then also Yellow Cake. I don't know if anyone saw, but over in the corner over here, there's a fantastic setup of clothing and dresses. And so they are one of our sponsors for today, and I would love if you could go check it out. Valerie is here, and she's awesome and very helpful. And with that, I'm going to introduce our first panel of the afternoon. It is the ABA Commission on Women Report, Legal Careers of Parents and Child Caregivers. Our panelists for this afternoon are Lola Garcia. She is a partner at UBGreensfelder. Amy Kullik. She is a partner at Phillips. And Stephanie Scharf. She is a partner at Scharf Banks Maimbourg, and she is the former chair of the ABA Commission on Women Profession. She's going to be the first presenter this afternoon. She helped write the report. So thank you so much for being here, coming in from Chicago. I appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
Thank you. I've been to Cleveland over the years, and I must say it was really wonderful to be here. I haven't been here in about 10 years, and I remember first coming 40 years ago. And the downtown looks fabulous. I mean, just fabulous. And I know I heard you're getting a new airport, but to me, the airport looked great. So God bless you if you're getting a new one. And I also was very impressed with the statistic about the percentage of women judges, because that's not typical. And congratulations there for that kind of progress. This is the title. And I'm going to talk to you about the legal careers of parents and child caregivers, really mostly parents. And the first thing I'd like to do, catch you up on some context of where we are today. And this slide shows 2023 statistics about the status of women in the law. Today, although it's been true for about 25 years, 50% of all first-year law students are women, 56%, excuse me, the highest ever. But for the last 25 years, close to 50% of law school graduates have been women, and 50% of associates, starting associates, are women. But again, it's been close to 50% for about the last 25 years. What is new is that 30% of associates are lawyers of color, and women lawyers of color comprise almost 18% of associates. That's new, that's growing, that's the power of a lot of factors, but that's not going to change given the demography of this country. That's going to keep going. What isn't new, and here's the rub, is only 24% of equity partners are women. And there are many fewer women of color who are equity partners. Black and Latino women, for example, are only 1% of all equity partners. So this is not something that's new. It's something that my colleagues and I have been studying for a number of years. Some of you may know about these reports. I mean, I started studying women in the law in 2005 when I started the first NAWL annual survey of women in the law. And then some of my colleagues and I, over time, also looked at women compared to men. Walking out the door, first chairs at trial. I do a lot of work with Bobby Liebenberg, who, like me, is a kind of fellow Red B. We do consulting on the side through the Red B group. Destiny Peary, Paulette Brown does a lot of work with us. Eileen Letts. And basically what these studies showed is not simply that women weren't reaching the same ranks as men, but some of the reasons why women weren't. What we found is, and when we were talking to people about, well, what does this research mean? I think when we started to look at what is the barrier here, for 25 years, there hasn't been a growing expansion of women in the most senior positions in firms. There's been some expansion in companies, but still, I think the number of women general counsel of the Fortune 500 today is like 28%, maybe it's 30%. So it's not like it's on a par with who's been graduating from law school. So what we came to was the idea, you know what, we're missing something here. Because what we had been looking at is the traditional approach of looking at men compared to women. But what we were missing is, you know, it's not like life is in an office. and then somehow there's another life in a parallel universe outside of the office. You are who you are, and your life includes many aspects of what you do, of family, of work, of friends, of children. And what I think what was happening with these studies looking at just men versus women is we weren't picking up how what I think of as real life impacts work, and how work impacts real life. And we were ignoring how life cycle stages really affect careers. There's been a lot of that bubbling up in the sociology literature. Some of you may have heard of what's called the motherhood penalty, which is economic research. But there hasn't been the kind of full-fledged research of what happens to careers, and especially none of that about what happens to careers of women lawyers. We had a great opportunity through the American Bar Association, which was willing to fund a study about the legal careers of parents with a strong emphasis on women who are parents. I did the research and wrote the report with Bobby Liebenberg and Paulette Brown, and it's the first national study of parenting and legal careers that was ever done. And what I'd like to do is show you some of the results. The report is 120 pages. It's very intense with results. It also has, as all of our reports have, a conclusion section about best practices to advance women, and especially women with children in the law. But let me just show you just a few of the results. So it turns out that in law firms, mothers have much more likely to have negative experiences than fathers. And, you know, as I say that, I kind of hear some of you saying, okay, so what else is new? We know that. But what is new is here is systematic data. And we found over the years that and I'm a trial lawyer too, while anecdotes are great with juries, when it comes to leaders and managers and executives of firms and companies, data really matters. They want to see the data. So here the data are. Women are far more likely than men to receive demeaning comments about being a working parent. They felt they were perceived as being less committed to their careers. Women experienced a lack of access to business development opportunities after they became mothers. Mothers felt that they were perceived as less competent after they became mothers. They were denied a salary increase or bonus compared to fathers. And they were denied or overlooked much more often, they reported, than for advancement or promotion. And this isn't that we said, okay, you're a mother, did this happen to you? We asked people if it happened to them, and then we looked at the differences between mothers and fathers, and this is what we found. Another thing we found, which may not be a surprise to everyone, is mothers overwhelmingly are the parents who do double duty for child care and household care. And here's the results of questions when we asked, who does these things in your family? Do you do it alone? Does your partner do it, or does someone else do it? And you can see on every single variable, arranging for childcare, something like 65% of women say, I do that myself, and less than 10% of men say that. I leave work for childcare. Something like 48% of mothers say that, and roughly 18% of fathers. And you can go up the scale, as it were. Child care in the daytime, mothers do that. Child care in the evening, mothers do that. Help with homework, mothers are much more likely to do that. They are far more likely to arrange for medical care, attend extracurricular activities, cook meals, and take care of other household responsibilities. Another interesting fact isn't here. When you ask people, well, is this shared? Which of these activities are shared? Among those who say they're shared, fathers are much more likely to say, oh, of course they share in this. but their spouses don't think that. Something else we found among mothers and fathers of dependent children, both men and women experience stress and burnout, often or almost always. But women are much more likely, mothers are much more likely to report than fathers that they have these experiences often or almost always. So mothers are much more likely to think they are overwhelmed with things to do. They have stress about work, they have stress about parenting more often feel that the day never seems to end. But there's one variable that's a little bit different. When you ask, are you doing a good job balancing work and home? Fathers are much more likely to think that than mothers. So again, it's a sense of stress and burnout, especially with dependent children. These data are a little bit different if you don't have dependent children. And the data, by the way, that I'm showing you about firms are very similar in other settings because we did research on corporate law departments, we did research on not-for-profits, we did research on government. But the firm data is more robust because there are a lot more people involved in the survey. You know, there's a big push in different parts of the country. Well, we know we're losing women. How can we keep women? And it turns out that certain aspects of culture really matter for women, including mothers. And here are 3 factors that compare how important are these factors among women and among men. These are the percentage of women and men who think these factors are very or extremely important in deciding whether to change jobs. One is women are much more interested in a stronger culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion than men. Women are much more interested in the ability to work remotely on the schedule that they choose. This survey was done about a year ago, so it's changed a little. We have some more recent statistics, but the differences are about the same. And women are much more interested in having a better work-life balance than men. There's all sorts of data that shows that women are being pushed and pulled and they don't think they're receiving the support as parents that they need to proceed and receive to progress. Certainly things are better than they were 30 years ago when, for example, it was almost unheard of for a mother to be able to work part-time. Those days are gone. What's not gone is reaching the top ranks of leadership and having all opportunities open to mothers that are open to fathers. So, you know, that kind of leads to the question of, well, who's supposed to take care of this? Not everyone would agree, but I believe that employers, for the benefit of their business, for having better businesses, better results, a more diverse set of people to draw on, more diverse thinking, I think that it's incumbent on businesses, and I put law firms in that category, as well as corporations, to have policies and practices that matter for whether people advance. Now that's an easy thing to say. Everybody says that, of course. It makes perfect sense. What is new and what we have in this survey is, do policies and practices matter when they're in place? And there's very little hard data on that, and this is national data about that. So this is what we see. Do firm policies matter? Yes. And let me show you exactly how they matter. Here is a chart of women answering whether their firm is successful at promoting mothers into leadership roles. And there were 2 sets of women for each policy we asked about. There were women in firms with certain policies and women who were not in firms with those policies. And if you look across the policies, mentoring and sponsorship programs, written succession procedures, leadership and management training, implicit bias training, monitoring gender metrics, not just talking, but actually monitoring gender metrics. If you look, women in firms with those policies are significantly more likely to say their firm is successful at promoting mothers into leadership roles. And the same thing, by the way, took place in the corporate sample. With those policies, maybe one or two switched out, women in corporate law departments said, yes, these policies matter for promoting women into leadership roles. And we did it with some other policies as well. It may be hard to read, but here are 6 more policies, 7 that matter. Part-time work is credited for promotion to partnership. A written policy that discourages emails and calls and meetings during evenings and weekends. There's a lot of differences among workplaces in that, but I heard horror stories during the pandemic, and they haven't all stopped, about how Saturday night, their boss called, we got to do this, can't wait, and that they felt like they were on 24/7 and had no respite. Another policy is leadership, providing leadership and management training for women lawyers, monitoring gender metrics, especially of women with children, written standards and procedures for succession. It still kind of surprises me today that when I talk to people, there are women who are partners, non-share partners in firms. They don't have a clue about how you become an equity partner because they're not told. So there should be written procedures and standards for succession, implicit bias training, and mentoring sponsorship programs for women lawyers with children. These are really just a few of the pieces of information we have that makes us focus so much on having policies that are in place and that are monitored and that are assessed and that are revised if you find out they're not working and are kept in place if you find out they're working. We have a lot of written in more detail than these headlines about what employers can do to retain and advance women with children. One thing that my colleagues and I feel very strongly about is that leadership matters. And leadership that is engaged and transparent and accountable makes a big difference in who advances in a workplace. If they make decisions, hopefully they make decisions that work and work for the goals that the leadership and the firm generally has, or the company generally has in mind. It's important also to have very transparent and supportive communications. Nobody should be afraid to walk down the hall and ask someone for advice about a dilemma. Although there's plenty of stories like that they are. But it's much better for everybody, but especially for women, if there are supportive communications and open communications. And also having clear written policies about how you advance. What do you have to do to become a partner? What do you have to do to become an equity partner? What do you have to do to play a role as associate general counsel? It's nice to know that stuff without having to guess and seeing it go sort of in a way that's fairly anecdotal and not consistent. And the last 4 that I wanted to focus on today is, again, the importance of metrics to measure change and gauge success. It can't be a loosey-goosey and anecdotal way of looking at how you're succeeding. Most workplaces are big enough so that they can have metrics. Even if you're a workplace of 50 people, you can have metrics about how people are doing. A lot of people would really appreciate greater parental resources and support. There are some companies and some firms that organize childcare. They don't necessarily pay for it. They may pay for a little bit, but it makes it easy and organized and close to the workplace. That's just one example. Strong wellness programs. There's a lot of stress and a lot of burnout among working mothers, especially mothers of young children. You know, most of the people we see, they, at least on the surface, they're holding it together, but you don't hear what's happening at home and the calls to their mother or the fights with their partner. I mean, there's a lot of stress. And it's nice if a work, you know what, we're going to help you deal with that. We'll have some affinity groups. We'll have some groups there where you can get together and get advice and learn practical things that might help you. That's just one example. And the other thing is, with so much, I don't want to say fully remote, because most employers of lawyers are not yet fully remote, or not still fully remote. Some are. I've talked to some people today who are working in that setting. But when we did this survey, and we have found that the norm is what I'd call hybrid working. Maybe you have to come in 2 days a week. Maybe it's 4 days a week. Maybe it's 3 days a week. Very few employers are requiring every day a week. But in order for that to work, you need excellent technical and administrative support, especially technical support for remote work. And the other thing you need, which is not on this chart, but it really has to do with policies and practices, is because people are working remotely or in a hybrid way doesn't mean they've fallen off the track. So it's true, if you come into the office 3 days a week, you're much more likely to be seen, to have that hallway coffee conversation with someone who's important, to get the next assignment because they see you walking down the hall. But if a firm allows hybrid working, or a company, they shouldn't just say, okay, you take what's there. There should be policies and practices in place to make sure those people who are working on a hybrid basis also have the opportunities that the people who are there all. I think that's it, except here are two big picture questions. How do we move forward, and what do we want to achieve as leaders in the profession and as lawyers in firms and other workplaces? You know, everyone in this room has a part to play, in my view, and can play a part.
The first question that I have for the panelists today, what are some of the biggest obstacles we still see for women as caregivers? And also, being a parent is one thing, but also we've heard of the sandwich generation. So you may be caring for small children, but you may also be helping to care for parents or grandparents or other family members. So it's more wide-ranging. And again, caring for older adults as well, most of the time we find falls on women. And so, Lola, I'll start with you. What are some of the biggest obstacles you see for this today?
And I think that is true, that women are still, even in a partnership with two working parents, that the expectation for women is still very much that they're the primary person responsible. I'm lucky enough not to be in that situation. But it's striking to me how, when people find out about the number of children that I have, that they're like, oh, how do you do it? And I'm like, how do I do it? How does this guy do it? I don't know. You know, that the schools still call me first, even though I'm never the one that leaves to pick them up. Though there is always still this built-in expectation that mothers and women will be the caretakers and the caregivers for their family. And that's true when it's talking about, women who have male siblings and issues come up with parents. I think it still mostly falls to the women in the family. And then it's certainly true, looking at women with children. And I think one of the main things that, to overcome that is to just be very communicative. This is where I get to talk about how important it is to have these conversations with your partner. What is the real expectation? And it's, I've been married twice, lucky me, but that, if someone is taking it for granted, then it does make a difference to be like, hey, I'm about to make partner. What are our lives going to look like? Hey, we want to start talking about, having children, especially earlier in your career. What is that going to look like? And having those conversations with your partner, your mother-in-law, your neighbors, to make sure that you are setting up to have the supports that you need to be able to excel in the profession. Because as much as I would like to say that things are going to change dramatically, and I think having millennial partners does make a difference in terms of how some of these things are viewed. And I know we're going to talk about that later, but that it is still primarily on us to be able to set up the supports for our own success. And that's a conversation I have very candidly with the associates that I work with, male and female, about this is a wonderful profession. This is a rewarding profession. This is also a high demand profession. And what does it really take to be successful? And what do you need to do? And how, now that I'm a practice group leader, how can I help? But I think open communication and figuring out what your life really looks like is absolutely key to continuing to be successful.
So I found myself in the position where I was part of that sandwich generation. So I had a toddler and I had a parent who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I'm an only child, so I was her caregiver. And the impact of that, the obstacle there on a number of levels was, missing work, not being there, not having that face time. This is, of course, pre-pandemic. Where those things are important, and it's observed that you're not there because you're moving someone to assisted living, or the police were called, or the police called you because you need to go and address an unruly parent who's yelling in the neighborhood, right? So there's that obstacle in the workplace about the perceptions of our abilities to be available to get the work done. And of course, we overcome that by doing the work and getting it done. But the other component is the financial component. So, preparing for today, looking at how much does it cost to be a caregiver, right? $300,000 if you have a child from birth until age 18. Or if you're caring for a parent or another family member and you're their caregiver, it's $1,000 a month on average. And I can attest to all of that. So when if your perception is that you're being denied those promotional opportunities, those leadership roles, those equity partnerships, if you will, anything that would put money in your pocket, that's a loss to you on top of the money that's coming out of your pocket to be a caregiver. So you have those financial burdens. And when I looked up statistics, about 23% of adults are part of the sandwich generation. Where did I find those statistics? Mental health websites, right? Because we have burnout from all of that. So that it's a big part of, being a lawyer is stressful enough, no matter what type of law you practice or where you practice. And really working anywhere can be stressful. But compound that with the responsibilities of being a caregiver for your children or for your family. It's a lot, and it leads to burnout. And I know we saw that in your statistics, in your study. And it's so important, from that perspective that, we focus on, not just work-life balance, but mental health care, asking for help, being vulnerable, being willing to say, okay, I'm, 45 years old and I've never had to deal with something like this before. I need help. And getting resources through support groups and social workers and those folks, things that I'd never done before, I did. Because it was scary, and I was trying to avoid, the high pressure of the high risk of that burnout and that stress. So, I think when we talk about the obstacles, we look at it from success, in our career and moving forward. We look at it financially. We look at it from a burnout perspective, and those are huge obstacles. But I think. Some of the things that Stephanie talked about with how we can address those are important. And I know we'll talk about this today.
I think something you just said, Amy, about doing it all and figuring it out. We're smart people. Most of us here went to law school, passed the bar, work as lawyers. The idea that we can do it all and should do it all, but don't talk about it at work. Millennials are becoming partners, and everyone seems to think us millennials are really cranky and whiny and cause a lot of problems. But now we're starting to lead things, and maybe we really can change some things. So So how much has changed in the last, we'll say 10 years, because that's kind of where the millennial group is right now?
No, I don't think a lot has changed, but I think what will change is the generational turnover and people who are more willing to talk about these issues and to be sympathetic to those issues is what is ultimately going to make a difference. So I'm very excited about the dawn of millennial leadership, even though we definitely are whiners. But I think that it's a pretty tough road to try to change the mind of somebody in their 50s or 60s who is like, well, this is what I did to excel in this profession. I don't understand why you can't do it. And you can sort of keep poking, well, like, how many women did you start with? Like, whatever happened to that woman that was that you worked with but is no longer here? And you can you can drop those hints, but I think ultimately changing minds is it's a good way to bang your head against the wall. So I think it's finding a place where you feel like you can excel, and that's as important as anything. Like, is this a place where I can do the things that I want to be able to do? Is this the right workplace for me? And it took me a couple of tries before being at my current firm, where I know that I can do all the things that I want. And it does suck to feel that pressure to do it all, but nothing feels better than when you are doing it all and you're rocking it. When you're able to be there for your kids, when you're able to be doing well at work, like, it is definitely worth the stress, the sleepless nights to be like, yes, I love litigating and I am so good at it, and I love mothering and I'm pretty good at it most of the time. Maybe not most of the time, but it's such a good feeling to be able to get to that point where you have that, both things in your life that are very meaningful to you, that it's worth kind of the legwork. And that's one of the things that I try to impart on younger lawyers as a millennial leader in a firm, to say, this part sucks, and I know it sucks because I was there. I was there trying to be on a call when a baby is throwing up on me. It's awful, but when you get, stick it out, and it will be so rewarding, and you can be so happy. But there are going to be those challenges, and I think we'll talk about off tracking, I think, in a second. But to challenge everyone to sort of say there will be hard years tacked onto each other, but that it's worth it to persist in this profession.
I'm a little bit older, in the Gen X area. And I will say I've really been grateful for a lot of the changes that I've seen in the last 10 years. In my workplace, as an example, the gals, we all like to talk and how was our weekends and what's going on with our kids. The guys do it too. And they get right in there and talk about their weekends and their kids, and they leave early and they go to soccer games and they go to doctor's appointments and all of the things. And I just think that's incredible, and I'm proud of that for them. And they have, wives that work too, and they've had those conversations, Lola, that you were talking about, that communication about who needs to be on deck this week, and what the priorities need to be. So I've been truly impressed by that. And I think, when I started out as a new lawyer and you're interviewing and a firm tells you that they're family friendly, and you need to say, well, what does that mean? And ask some questions. Does that mean that, it's okay if I have a family? Well, I hope so. But how are you demonstrating that? And so, as a candidate, you can ask some of those questions, like, well, what types of things do you do that are family friendly? And hopefully it's more than just a summer picnic, right? It's, I volunteer for my kids, to coach my kids. Anything that would indicate to you that it's okay. And as a new lawyer, I didn't have kids. I didn't care about that at the time. But when I became a parent, I thought, wow, I was in a great place. I saw people who were leading by example, who were coaching, who were leaving early for doctor's appointments, and who were talking about their kids and asking you about your kids. And I think that's important. And if you're not getting that, that's, at a point, if that's something that's important to you, it's maybe, something you want to consider in your career, where you land, and what's important to you at those times. But I'm really, I think, positive about the changes that I've seen in my 20-some years.
Working from home. COVID changed a lot. Stephanie touched on that. Do we think that has helped or hurt us? Stephanie, I'm going to start with you.
So I don't think there's an answer yet. In fact, there's been a lot of writing about this in many businesses, not just the law. And I don't think we know long-term whether it helps or hurts. I think there are pros and cons to both setups. I do think before you, or if you're working somewhere, or certainly before you take a new job, you need to ask about that and need to see how it fits your life. The downside is a given. You're not there. I talked about that before. Not being there can hurt your career unless you're in a setup where everyone's not there, and that's not good enough, and they have a way to keep you involved, keep you top of mind, give you opportunities. What I've seen mostly today is, for sure, 3 days a week. 4 is ideal. We don't care which 3 or 4 it is, but come in 3 or 4. And unfortunately, if you want to work remotely, it makes a difference unless you have an arrangement that's very specifically tailored to what you're doing, and you won't miss out on opportunities.
I think in the immediate term, the effect of COVID has been positive. I think it did open up the conversation that we heard about, like, what is your real life like? And when we were going through that, it put everybody's real life front and center. You saw kids running around in the background of Zooms. And I think it made everybody a little bit more empathetic to what everybody else might be going through. And I hope that that is something that we hang on to culturally in the wake of the pandemic. I'm optimistic, but you're right. It's really hard to measure. This was like a generation altering experience, and to see what the long-term effects of that are. In terms of like remote work now, I think there is a lot more flexibility, even if there are these rigid 3 days a week, 4 days a week. Like you don't see people in the office at 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, the way that, it was pre-pandemic. It is much more typical that people cut out at 4 and log back in. So I think the immediate effects have been more flexibility, and I have seen that mostly benefit the parents that I work with, and specifically the moms, but a lot of dads, that they can say, okay, I know I need to be home, and like from 3 to 5, 3 to 6, I'm focused on my kids. But you do have a lot more people then logging back in after bedtime, and having that second shift of work, which to me is very valuable. I know to somebody who doesn't have kids and wants to be done at 6, and they're getting emails from me at 10, is probably not appreciated. But I think there is an immediate impact on flexibility in the workplace, even as we are going back to hybrid or mandatory days in the office.
Anything to add there, Amy, before we go to questions?
No, ma'am.
I think, I'm not in a firm anymore, obviously, but I hope gone are the days that you go into the office on a Saturday just to email everyone to say, like, I am here if anyone needs anything, or I'm working on this. You can do that at home now.
I will sometimes hide from my kids in the office on Saturdays
Part two.
and Sundays, but we don't even have the heat and all the main lights on. So if that's indicative of I couldn't find anything more indicative of a change than that.
We have a few minutes for 1 or 2 questions. I did have one. There's a very active Lady Lawyers Facebook group, and they were talking about parental leave policies. Could we just quickly go over what does parental leave look like today? What do we see in firms? And Stephanie, in your research, did you come across some typical leave policies?
Yeah, we did a very detailed set of questions about leave policy. And I will say that if you are in a workplace that gives you 1 month or less parental leave policy, it's way, way out of sync with what the norm is. I would say the norm today is 3 months. That's for birth parents. People still make a distinction between a birth parent and a non-birth parent, which I don't agree with, but it happens. But I would, if you look at our report, which is free online, by the way, at americanbar.org, If you look at the report, you'll see very detailed data about who gets parental leave, how long is it, and other aspects of parental leave that I think are important. I would like to make a separate point, and I wasn't coached to say this, but I am a big believer in bar associations. I'm a big believer in the power of bar associations. So what can a bar association do with something like this? First of all, it's a safe place to be when you're really furious at your firm or you're totally burned out and you want to complain and you want to get some support, come to your bar association. But I think more importantly, I think a bar association can say, this is a big issue. We take it seriously, Metropolitan Cleveland, and we're going to give some advice and guidance about what we consider to be reasonable standards and doable standards. And so that's not something that one person can do alone. That's not something that even 3 or 4 or 6 people can necessarily do alone. But under the umbrella of we're here to advance the profession, I really believe the bar associations can be very helpful with these issues.
I mean, I think I have to end after that. But Lola, you have something to say. Just let's mic drop and then Lola go.
Sorry to talk after the mic drop. But one thing that has me really excited about the change in parental leave policies is the gender blind or not making a distinction between birth parent and non-birth parent. Plug for UBGreensfelder, we just changed our policy. So now every parent gets almost 4 months. And as someone who, as you heard me say, puts a lot of stock in generational change, I think there will be a big difference in our profession if both men and women have to go through the process of off-tracking and on-tracking for parental leave. And I think if that becomes a gender-neutral experience and not just a female experience of like, okay, how am I going to take 3 months or 6 months off work? If that's something that everybody is going through and everybody in leadership has that experience going through it, I think that's going to make a significant difference in the next generation of lawyers. So that's one thing that has me really optimistic and excited.
There are actually firms that require, very few, but there are firms that require both parents, if there are 2 parents, to take parental leave. So it's not that they're both working in one firm, but they require fathers to take parental leave, not just mothers. It's a very innovative firm that does that, but it does happen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for this time today. I really appreciate it.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Melanie Farrell, and I'm the Director of Membership here at the CMBA. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to first thank our next set of sponsors. As Judge Russo mentioned, the CMBA Women in Law section, the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities, Direct Recruiters Incorporated, McDonald Hopkins, and McMahon DeGaius. Thank you so much for your support of today. I'm going to introduce our second panel, Workstyles and Worldviews, Navigating Generational Diversity. We have Reilly Berk, the CEO of Berk Enterprises, Rita Maimbourg, partner at Tucker Ellis, Chandra Monday, product manager at Progressive Insurance, Dana Paris, partner at Nuremberg and Paris, and our moderator is Lindsay Self, an associate with the Haber Legal Group. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay.
Okay, so there are currently 4 generations in the workplace together. We have Gen Z, who are 27 years old or younger, millennials, who are 28 to 43 years old, Gen X, 44 through 59 years old, and baby boomers, 60 through 78. These generations have had different experiences in the workplace, especially as women lawyers. For instance, in 1970, only 3% of lawyers were women. Today, 39% of lawyers are women. So with that very minimal background, for the panelists, if you don't mind, can you share what generation you're in? And if you have found that women from different generations have difficulty connecting because of these differences.
I'm a millennial. And to answer your second question, in terms of communicating amongst different generations of women, I haven't had too much of a problem with that. I think a lot of it has to do with personality-wise, finding empathy and being able to communicate well with women. I enjoy talking to people. So I personally haven't had too much problems with that.
I'm here for Generation X, and I also don't think it's been too problematic to relate across the generational spectrum. So we Gen Xers, we're the generation that grew up pre-technology and, kind of made that bridge to the post-technology world. We also spent a lot of time on our own as latchkey kids, no cell phones out of the house. So I think as Generation Xers, we learned a lot about kind of being independent, but also it's not all about us. We can kind of relate to, people that we see because, the expectation was, you have to be independent and operate in a world with a lot of different things in play. So I haven't, but flexibility, I think, is a big part of that.
Very good.
I don't think I've had any trouble communicating, probably because, as Dana said, of my personality. I am very curious about people. I want to talk to you. I want to learn about you. I don't really see there to be communication problems. There are other problems, but not communication.
I'm a Gen Z. Is anyone else a Gen Z in here? Woo, let's go, girls. Okay. When it comes to communication, I don't think I've experienced too many issues with that across different generations. I think if anything, it's, for example, like my grandma. Love my grandma all the time. She's like, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to settle down, be a homemaker, do all the things? I can't wait to do that. But I'm like, Grammy, I could do both. I can have a career and I can do the kid thing. So as far as communication, I don't think it's been too big of an issue across different generations. And I think there's just maybe some differences in mindset and perspective.
So we talked a little bit, everyone touched a little bit on communication styles. To put it in perspective, email wasn't regularly used in law firms until the early 90s. So for those more experienced lawyers, the transition to Zoom calls and emails instead of in person or over the phone, I imagine, has been an adjustment. Going down the panel, when you're considering how to communicate with someone in your office who may be in a different generation, what are some things that you do to make sure that you're communicating appropriately so that you can be heard and be able to build that relationship? And we'll start with Dana and go down the line.
Sure. So I always like to put myself in their position and say, well, I don't want to inundate with them with information if they're not prepared to have this conversation. So I always try to be sympathetic to that aspect of it and certainly cognizant of that. And then I also reflect on, well, how do I want someone to communicate with me? So what I prefer to do, even with the baby boomer generation, which is a lot of the generation that I work with on a daily basis, I think scheduling a meeting, scheduling a call, emailing, but I think having in-person or telephone calls with them is typically the best way to communicate with them that I find. I think sometimes when you communicate via email amongst any generation, there are too many ways to misinterpret anything, whether it's a concerning issue or just a non-issue that may become something. You know what I mean? So I think scheduling a conference in person, over the phone, that signals to them that you respect their time and you're not just going to bombard them when they're not prepared to have that conversation. And likewise for myself, that's how I prefer to communicate. I think we feel overwhelmed amongst communication, whether it's emails, personally within my practice, phone calls, text messages from clients. My phone has become like the bane of my existence. You are constantly connected. So when I get to the office and I want to try to be as efficient with my time as possible, I have found for me, scheduling meetings and phone calls, that's what I appreciate the most.
My perspective is that context is key for communications. Email can easily snowball into death by 1,000 paper cuts. Email can be important for, when you need to establish something on record or summarizing something. But the key difference is synchronous versus asynchronous communication. And email can just sit and you don't have the dialogue that you need to have. So you have to know when it's important to schedule time. I also manage a small team, and I have one-on-one meetings weekly with each of my team members and also a team meeting. And those we do by, kind of video call in our virtual world. And not everybody wants to be on camera, and that's fine. I don't think, you have to put yourself on the other person's shoes and not make the communication feel like a pressure situation. Work has to get done for sure, but it has to be collaborative, and you should understand where the other person is coming from. Phone call scheduling, in the role of in-house lawyer, we often find ourselves in the position of people just throwing meetings on your schedule, and you can easily lose control of your calendar. So being able to control your own calendar is important as well. And then with meetings that people set, I take the meetings, but also, send me an agenda, give me some prep in advance, send me a quick email summarizing what we'll be talking about so I'll be prepared. Don't set yourself up for failure in those communications either.
So yes, as a baby boomer, when I started practicing law in 1981, we did not have computers, we did not have email. And in fact, when I had my children in 1994, we certainly didn't have laptops. We had desktops, right? And so when I was on leave, I didn't have a computer to work with. I had a delivery person would come and pick up my drafts and take them to the office. It was insane. In terms of communication, I really prefer face-to-face, one-on-one communication. When I was, for the last 3 years of my practice, I was in charge of the young lawyers in our firm. And I had a lot of meetings with them, and it was my job to help them figure out how to succeed in the practice of law. And I wanted to be one-on-one with them because you can read a lot with body language, you can really see a lot. And for that reason, when we did do Zoom, I wanted to see their face on the camera. I don't like just telephone calls, and I don't like looking at a black screen. And when I'm talking to a client, I want to be able to see them. So I think in person is the best. Zoom or FaceTime, whatever, video call, Teams is second best. And with remote work, we baby boomers, we actually accept remote work. We don't expect people to be in the office every day. But if we're going to have a meeting, we're going to do it with our faces on the camera. I also think with communication, it's very important to have an agenda. Always, I think you mentioned that. And it's better to say to someone, hey, do you have time for a call today or a meeting today? What time would be good for you? Baby boomers appreciate that. Maybe everybody appreciates that, but I would rather get that notice.
Very good. So my favorite ways to communicate would be in person, on the phone, or through email, which might be different than other Gen Zs that might prefer to email, direct message, or even text to communicate. I think when communicating with different generations, it's important to, one, know who's going to be in this meeting with you, but two, I think it also depends on the conversation that you're going to have. If I needed to fire an employee for some reason, I don't think I would do that over text. Even though I'm a Gen Z, we like to text. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that's a conversation that would better be had in person. So I think, I think it just depends on the situation. If I'm heading to a meeting, letting one of my team members know, hey, I made it, that could probably be a text or an instant message. But I think it just depends on the conversation that you're going to have.
Last year, a professor from Yale shared a story publicly that in the 80s, she was turned away from a federal courtroom in Alabama as a judicial clerk because she was wearing a pantsuit instead of a skirt. While hopefully not as severe, work attire is certainly still a hot topic for those of us who are doing trial work, certainly something that women in that area talk about, and it's important. I'm going to set aside workplace dress becoming more casual generally due to COVID. I'm going to start with Rita on this. How have you seen dress change for women in practice over the years? And what about those changes do you think have been positive? And what changes do you think may negatively impact women lawyers in their careers moving forward?
So who has seen those pictures of women in the 80s wearing suits with ties? You know, those we were trying to look like men because we thought, well, we were in a men's profession. When I started practicing my firm, there was one woman partner, and she really didn't want to have anything to do with us. And so we had no mentorship, and we just thought we should look like men. I was so glad when we got rid of those. But we wore suits, not, when I say suits, I mean jackets and skirts that matched. We didn't wear blazers with a skirt, and we wore pantyhose, and we wore pumps. And a funny story, at my firm, it was Arter and Haddon, my fellow associate Irene Keyes Walker and I, it was the winter, it was 1984. It was really cold and no one wore pants. So we decided we were going to wear pants one day, both of us, because we thought they wouldn't fire both of us. And the secretaries were so happy that we wore pants. I mean, it's just a different world. I can hardly believe it. So obviously, we have had changes, and you know, you look around what women are wearing today, you know? I mean, although I will say this jacket I'm wearing, it's a classic, it's from the 80s. And I'm really proud that I still wear it. I think it's been very positive that women can wear pantsuits to work in the courtroom, that women can go to court with a skirt suit and not wear pantyhose. I mean, that was really controversial for a while. Women had to wear pantyhose, and you were worried what the jury would think if you didn't have pantyhose on. Now, on the negative side, and this could be COVID related, so I might be going outside of your question. One of our young lawyers wore Converse sneakers to a meeting, and I did not have a positive reaction to that. And you know, I said to her, you know, there are some people here who are not going to take you seriously because you are wearing sneakers to work. Maybe they're comfortable and you know, it's okay, but some people aren't going to like it. You just have to accept the fact that you are working in a firm where there are people of different generations with different backgrounds, and they're going to look at you differently. And then just a couple weeks ago, my daughter, who's 29, millennial, I guess, she came over after work and was wearing Converse. And I'm like, anyway. So workplace attire, I just think, you know, I used to wake up in the morning and say, what do I have to do today? Am I going to court? Am I having a meeting? Or am I just working in my office? And I would dress accordingly. I mean, I never have worn sneakers to work, but you know, I would just dress down a little bit. And I think that's good advice for anyone. What are you doing today? If you're working remotely, just wear your sweatpants. But if you're going to have a Zoom call with a client, at least put on something on your top that makes you look professional. Because how you look is part of how you are perceived. And women are judged more harshly than men. Let's face it, we are. And that's what the Barbie movie's about, right? And I think it's important to look professional when you're having those contacts.
Very good. We had discussions in pre-planning and then even earlier today about recognizing who has the power, right? Who has the control in that moment, and are you dressing in a way that's going to impede your ability to be successful with that person or not? I'm going to jump to Dana. Dana, you're one of the younger lawyers on the panel, and you also do trial work, so you're in front of a jury. How do you think about your wardrobe? How often? I mean, is this a regular occurrence? And how are you thinking about what you're wearing when it comes to, for instance, a jury where we can wish that they would view us differently, but we're not going to change that by the time trial starts next week or whenever it starts? And how you navigate that as a woman lawyer in practice?
So, like Rita was saying, I wake up every day and say, gosh, what am I doing? Am I working solely in the office? Am I going to be meeting with clients, or am I in trial and in front of a jury, a judge, defense counsel? bailiffs, everybody else in the courtroom and the courthouse. I think, like Rita said, perception is key. The way that the judge, the jury, defense counsel views you is certainly a reality, and you want to have a good reflection of how you perceive yourself. You want to dress well, you want to look well, you put together. And personally, I think that's a reflection of you. When trying cases and you're in front of a jury, that jury is judging you no matter what. So I want to look nice, but I also have to make sure that whatever I'm wearing, whether it's a nice suit, a nice dress, right now what I'm wearing, whatever comes out of my mouth has to be even better than how I look. That's what matters at the end of the day. But first and foremost, how you present yourself is the first thing that the jury sees. And I think in comparison to men, and oftentimes men defense counsel, they usually wear the same suit, just kind of switch out the ties, and the jury's fine with that. The same shoes, whether they're polished, they're not polished. I don't really think that matters as much to the jury or the judge. But for us, it is different. It certainly is a different standard, and I recognize that, and I guess I am conforming to that.
So we'll switch gears just slightly on this, right? So we hear from those that are trying cases on how important this is. But I'm going to switch. Chandra and Reilly, Chandra, you're in-house. Reilly, you're the CEO of a company, right? You guys are normally sitting on the side of sometimes clients to these law firms that are very concerned about what we're wearing. As someone who's a client, do you, and you can do hypothetically, you don't have to give your personal opinion, but do you think that people in your position actually hold these strong opinions about what people are wearing, particularly women?
Hypothetically. I do think first impression is important, especially if we've never met before, we've never worked before, or if I'm bringing you to see one of my customers to represent me, I would expect that you would be dressed up and portraying yourself well. However, kind of echoing what Dana said, you could have on the best suit in the world, but if you don't understand my business, if you don't have a great understanding of your practice, you're not easy to work with, you're not nice to work with, then I'm not going to want to work with you. So I don't think dress is everything. But I do think, I would expect that, like I said, if we met for the first time, if you're representing me, I would expect that you would be dressed up. And plus, at least for me, I feel like I perform better when I'm dressed up. I feel more confident when I'm dressed up. So yeah, it's my opinion.
The company culture where I work is part of the package. And it's really just about being neat and professional. So the level of formalness doesn't so much matter. I do think court always requires a jacket, a suit. So court, I think, is its own category. But in terms of meeting with firms and outside lawyers, it doesn't so much matter, if they're suited or not, but it's professional attire. Are they professional? And then are they presenting themselves as a competent professional with an understanding of the topics, or asking good questions or the right questions and being thoughtful? So, at my company, we have definitely leaned into the you don't need to dress up world we live in. I've seen executives in sneakers. They use often a good combo is blazers and jeans that I see a lot at work, but a lot of people don't even wear blazers. But again, it depends on the context as well. Sometimes there's different events and things like that, and sales meetings. So context is key, but really neat and professional.
By the way, I have a PS. Do Vans count as sneakers?
They do. They do.
Okay, because I've worn Vans to work. But only if they matched my outfit.
We can't talk about different experiences across generations without talking about being a working parent. This was touched on a little bit in the last panel as well. The FMLA that provides leave, although unpaid, wasn't even passed until 1993. Right around the same time email came around, right? So for lawyers who were practicing prior to that time, certainly I would imagine their experiences were far different. as a personal aside, I attended law school with 2 toddlers and would sometimes bring them to class when my childcare fell through. And lawyers who've been practicing for 30 plus years have been shocked when they hear that that was my experience. I'm going to start with Dana on this one. Dana, you're a mother. What are some things that your firm has done that you feel has allowed you to be successful in practice while also balancing those responsibilities too?
So my firm, Nuremberg Paris, it's been around for almost 100 years, since 1928. And I'll share with you that I am the first female attorney at the firm to have children. There is another partner who has children, but it was more of a lateral move later on in her life. And she had children prior to coming to our practice. So when I found out I was pregnant, I told my husband, and then I told my parents, and my father at the time was the managing partner, and I still work with my father. And I didn't know how that conversation was going to go because our firm, we have policies, procedures, metrics, but I didn't know what that maternity policy was, how much time I got off, whether it was going to be paid. So my next thought was, how should this conversation go? And communication is key. And I sent an email to my father, and I said, let's sit down and let's talk about this. And number one, communication, and number two is support is incredibly important. They knew that support was key, and I asked for 3 months paid leave, didn't bat an eye, and I got that. And I will say, this is nothing that should be applauded or commended, but I did have to work during maternity leave. That's just kind of the reality of my personal practice. Leaving my clients for 3 months at a time wasn't quite possible. So was I still connected? Was I still working remotely? A little bit. I wasn't completely disengaged, but still having that time off to be at home with my babies was incredible. And so I'm so proud to be the first female at the firm to have a child and to kind of implement, this is what the norm should be. I should not have been working, but that's, like I said, kind of the reality of everything. And to go along also, Lindsay, with what you were saying is, I think the flexibility is really important as well. So being able to work remotely, still be in touch with your clients, still have that flexibility, to be present in the practice so you don't feel like you're being forgotten about while you're on maternity leave. And then transitioning back into work was easy. You know, you just kind of get back into things, and that fear of, gosh, if I leave for 3 months, are my clients going to forget about me? Are my clients going to go someplace else? It was a non-issue. So when I had my daughter, my second child, it wasn't as scary.
Chandra, I've had many friends, mostly women, who've gone in-house to better manage their home life and their work life. What about the in-house experience is so enticing for women at this stage? And what could law firms consider? You know, I'm sure law firms don't love to see, hopefully, the mass exodus of women at this stage in their life leaving. I mean, what are some of those things that are being offered in-house that make it so enticing?
And I've been in-house at 2 places. My first in-house job was at GE and then at Progressive. I think the most impactful element is no longer being beholden to the billable hour. It's more about, did you get your work done? Like, did you meet your objectives? Did you, kind of meet your milestones? You know what you have to do. You know, kind of what needs to be done throughout the course of the quarter, the year, et cetera. And so it doesn't really matter if you need to go and leave and go do something else, because you can come back and get back at it when you're ready. Being in-house was definitely a lot easier. I did have to do that, end of day daycare scramble every day, whereas at the law firm world, so I left the law firm, my kids were kind of in that preschool age, and that was harder to manage there, or I had to find a daycare that had longer hours. But what I will say about the law firm experience is that was the most generous maternity leave I've ever seen anywhere. I had 2 maternity leaves, one as an adoptive parent and one as a birth parent for my second one. And I was off close to 6 months both times, and people did not bother me while I was out. So it was very, very generous and very respected, just kind of those boundaries. Coming back, the transition was definitely harder because, like, again, you're throwing yourself into that scramble of, daycare, balancing things like that. And it has been a lot more manageable in-house. And I will say just kind of what is valued is a key component of that. At law firms, your hour is generally the source of revenue. So the value is more hours, being busy for more periods of time. And at companies, it's, are you achieving the milestones, helping the business close the deals, reach the transactions to accomplish the goals for, that type of revenue. So it has been different. And for law firms, I would say, I know there was a lot of talk when I was leaving the law firm about, are there other models besides the billable hour? I haven't seen that really propagate, so I don't know if there's a solution yet. But, thinking about how you value or what value is it just the billable hour, or are there other ways to kind of look at value?
Rita, the more experienced lawyers in the room, did not have this type of flexibility or acceptance of having children in practice, but certainly paved the way for those of us sitting here to have the experiences that we're having. What are some of the things that baby boomers and even Gen X folks did that created such a change over time?
So I love talking about this. In the early I had my twins in 1994, I mentioned, and at that time there had only been one woman partner, I was a partner at the time, who had worked reduced hours. And actually, we call it reduced hours, we don't call it part-time. And I think I like the reduced hours better, because part-time, I don't know, it just doesn't, no lawyer is part-time. If you're a lawyer and you're a professional, you are basically thinking about your job all the time. Anyway, she tried to work reduced hours, and she said to me, I'm working just as hard and getting paid less. So that was what I was facing. What am I going to do? So my twins, I was telling Lindsay, my twins were born at 29 weeks, and so they were in the NICU for quite a while. And while they were in the NICU, my secretary and I would meet. We went over I had a huge docket, and I was assigning these cases to other people. And I told my firm, but this was because I was a partner, not an associate. I told my firm, I'm not on maternity leave yet because my children are not at home. So I was getting paid, but I don't know what it was called. Then when I went home, I was trying to decide what to do. And I think our policy at the time was 3 months of paid leave. And my children came home on apnea monitors. And when they went off the monitors, I thought, okay, I could go back to work. But I decided not to go back to work. And I told my partner, Bob Tucker, who was my mentor, that I was not coming back to work, that I was quitting. So I had been working at that point 14 years. He said, I won't let you quit. I said, what do you mean you won't let me quit? He says, I won't let you quit. How many hours a week can you give me? And I thought about it, and I said, I can give you 12 hours a week. And I said, I want to be paid by the hour, which I don't think it was not legal at the time, but it was a long time ago, and the firm's defunct.
I won't tell.
Because I didn't want to work so many hours and then get cheated, because that was my friend's experience. So that's what I did. I said, I don't want to try any cases. I don't want to travel. I can't. I'll give you 12 hours a week. And it worked. And the lesson really for you is, I had an ally. I had a mentor. He was influential in the firm, and he went to management and said, this is what we're going to do for Rita. And, you know, I often look back and I talk to the young lawyers at the firm, and I said, you know, I worked part-time for a while, and, you know, then I got sucked back in, and I became, you know, I had very important client relationships. I became a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers. I headed up our trial department. I brought along many, many women and men into the partnership, and I viewed that as one of my most important jobs. And just think, what if Bob Tucker had said, okay, you can quit? You know, I've had a tremendous career, and when I retired at the end of the year, I mean, I didn't have any regrets. You know, I was telling Lindsay at lunch, you know, it's hard when you have kids and you're trying to manage, and I remember saying to them many times, I'm doing the best I can. I got a lot on my plate. And it is what it is. And since I have the mic, I'm going to say one more thing. Someone said, I think it was Lola said this, it reminded me of Gloria Steinem. Gloria Steinem, you know, I came of age when she was powerful. You know, Ms. Magazine was coming out, and her big thing was, you can do it all. Women can have it all. That put a huge burden on women professionals in the 80s because it was too hard to do it all. So to the women who want to work reduced hours or who want to work more remotely and go to the office less, just do it. You don't have to meet somebody else's standard, right? You have to be a professional, you have to be loyal to your clients, but you don't have to. She was wrong. You can have it all, but maybe not all at the same time.
100%.
Yeah, can I hear an amen? Yeah, amen. Woo! It's International Women's Day. So anyway, you know, looking back, I could tell many, many stories, but I won't. I'm going to put the mic down so that Lindsay can ask Reilly the next question.
No, thank you. You know, and it's interesting to hear different generations talking about doing similar things to make change, right? Which is when you're in a position where you have an opportunity to set a standard, stepping up and setting that standard, right? Whether it's the amount of time you're taking for maternity leave or a reduced hour schedule, and the change that makes for the firm and the practice moving forward. I think it's great to hear that. Reilly, as the youngest on the panel, what are some things that you would hope to see further develop in the workplace to make it even more accessible for parents?
Well, first to start, I don't have any kids yet. I'm getting married in September, and then I can't wait to have kids, but I don't have any kids yet. But I have a lot of employees and friends that have children, and I have so much respect for any of you in this room that have juggled your career while raising a family. Like, I know, like, that had to have been the hardest thing in the world. So much respect to all of you. I was reading something a few days ago, and it was about the cost of daycare getting so crazy and out of control. Like it's even as much as some people's like mortgages on their home, which is insane. So what I would like to see happen in the future, and I'm surprised that we don't see more of it now, but some of these larger corporations, Facebook, Google, Apple, offering daycare services and other services for children, I think that would be a win-win. I think they would be able to attract, key people on their team. It would maybe keep people in the workforce. And like I said, it really is a full-time job raising a family. So I think it'd be great to see more of that in the workforce.
Very good. And I'll give a plug to the prior panel. They talked about men taking time off, paternity leave after the birth of a child. I'm certainly not the only person who had the experience, but my children's dad got 3 days off after my kids were born. That was miserable. I think that type of change could be so significant. All right, we have a few minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about mentors and sponsors. These are different types of relationships that women can form, that people can form in the workplace to really help them manage through. They're sometimes formal, they're sometimes informal. I'm going to start with Rita again on this. Can you share your experience with sponsoring and mentoring less experienced lawyers and what that difference is in those relationships?
Mentoring is coaching, advising. Those are the adjectives I think about. And I once heard Barbara Snyder, the former president of Case Western Reserve University, give a talk about mentoring. And she said she had 4 mentors at her stage. She's at the highest level in the university. She has 4 mentors. One in education, somebody outside of education, in different areas. And I think it's super important to have a mentor in your own firm or your corporation. But I think you should also think, I could probably use a mentor in the business community or from my church or anybody, just somebody that you respect. So mentoring is that, and the goal is to help you achieve your professional goals. Do you need to have meetings with that person? I've mentored people where I've had regular meetings. I've mentored people where we've gone drinking on Fridays. It just depends on the person. Sponsorship is very, very important. When I was in charge of the young lawyers, I had a lot of opportunity to talk to other partners in the firm, and I would say, if a young lawyer makes a mistake, take it up with him or her and me. Don't be talking about it at lunch with your buddies. Don't be sending emails about it to people who really don't need to know, because that can hurt that reputation of the person, and it could be a career killer. But if the person does a great job and hits it out of the park, then become their sponsor. And that means when you're at lunch, you say, oh my God, Chandra did this memo for me. It was out of this world. I saw Dana in court. She was amazing. Her opening statement was incredible. That's being a sponsor, because you are helping that person's reputation. And so when that person is, being considered for partnership, oh, there's this big buzz about Chandra. Wow, everybody's talking about great things. So that's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And I also want to just mention what an ally is. And obviously, I could have never succeeded in my career without an ally, and that was Bob Tucker. He was also my mentor, but he was, my ally, and he wasn't a woman, and so you need men in this profession to help you succeed.
Thank you. I got my 5-minute marker. So real quick, I'm going to ask, Dana, I'm going to ask you a question, and then we'll do another quick panel question at the end before we wrap up. Dana, you and I have talked about how much value that you have found in these types of relationships. And throughout the panel today, we've talked about all kinds of things that women lawyers are having to navigate through, like how to dress for certain occasions and all of these things that, while I wish we didn't have to deal with it, we do. First, how do you identify who these people are in your life, and what kinds of things do you go to them regarding? What are some of those topics?
I feel incredibly passionate about this. So, like Rita was saying, mentors, sponsors, allies, coaches, they are incredibly important, I think, to your own personal success in the legal field. How do I find them? Well, I didn't really have a choice. So he's my father. So I was incredibly lucky. My father wears multiple hats, mentor, sponsor, and ally. But also within the firm, I have other partners who I can go to and serve those roles as well. Absolutely. So what do I go to them for? I mean, it could be anything. On a day-to-day basis, how do I approach defense counsel for this problem? They're coming at me real hot and real aggressive. How do you suggest that I counter with that? What is the best way to do that? I drew a certain judge on a case that I don't have much experience with them. How do you recommend that I navigate that relationship? Or issues with clients. It can be a number of daily things, but also outside of just the day-to-day things, it's the business practice. That is so incredibly important to understand the inner workings of your firm. How do you excel in your firm from the associate, non-equity, equity, partner track? You have to understand those dynamics, and if it's, I don't want to say if it's behind closed doors or if it's something that you are not aware of, then take that upon yourself to become aware how you reach those different milestones in your career if that's what you want to do. It's not a guessing game, and it shouldn't be a guessing game. The fourth relationship that I think is really important is business coaching. I feel very, very strongly about this. I think somebody outside of the legal field who can help you as a business coach excel your own career and also be a cheerleader for yourself. And I have found having a female business coach, this is something that I do, having a female business coach is phenomenal. They're your own cheerleader. They give you that confidence on how to navigate certain hurdles. And I think sometimes when you're in that bubble of being in a male-dominated field, you become so in tune with one type of dialogue. And I think by being amongst a business coach or sponsors or allies from a female perspective, they open your eyes. They remove those blinders. And for me personally, it's been incredibly helpful.
Very good. Yeah, and I think, just as an aside, I think having someone outside of your law firm is helpful, whether it's a business coach or someone like that too, where they don't have control over your future, right? Where you can ask those questions that might make you feel stupid, right? And you don't have to look stupid in front of somebody who's deciding whether or not you get equity next year. I don't know if Diane Citrino's in this room, but she certainly changed the trajectory of my practice because I can call her and ask her any question in the world, and she doesn't decide if I get promoted, right? So I think those people are great. I think that's wonderful. I'm going to say I have one more minute. Okay, thank you. All right, real quick, we'll go through. I want everyone just to say something that you think has changed for the better for women in practice, and one thing that you're hopeful to see either change or develop more in the future. We'll start with Dana.
I guess in terms of the future, I hope that our field just continues to become more diverse. That's so important that we get more women of color in the workplace to offer that different perspective. And what has changed for the better for women? Just more women in the workplace. That has been monumental.
Very good. Chandra?
I think what has changed for the better is more opportunity and variety for women lawyers. I'm working in officially kind of a non-legal hat, although I'm very law adjacent. And what I would hope for, so I think I've seen in the in-house and kind of corporate company world that there's a lot of great resources and leadership development and like ERGs and opportunity to really be nurtured. I would like to see law firms kind of get there more collectively.
What has changed for the better is that there are more women in law firms and corporations to be mentors to young people, which I did not have. And what I hope for the future is that every law firm is headed by a woman.
Yeah.
I don't work in law, but what's changed for the better in my industry is there's a lot more women in leadership roles at restaurant chains and other distributors that we work with. And I'm also noticing younger generations, the Gen Zs and millennials, working their way up the ladder as well, which is really exciting. And for the future, I just want to continue seeing more of that.
Very good. We can have candid conversations, right? We can keep doing that. Thank you guys so much.
So this panel is speaking to languages, living multiple lives, identity and expression in the legal profession. We have Representative Juanita Brent from District 22 of the Ohio House of Representatives, Lorraine DuBose, Prosecuting Attorney, Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, Magistrate Kalila Lawson with the Cleveland Municipal Court, and our moderator is Amanda Kwan, the Office Managing Shareholder of Ogletree Deacons. Take it away, Amanda.
Thank you. We're excited to be here celebrating with you today. Our panel is really talking about authenticity. And I love this little quote about the definition. Authenticity at its core is the act of embracing and expressing one's true self. It involves living in alignment with one's values, beliefs, and personal identity, free from the pressure to conform to societal expectations. So we've got an interesting and fun discussion about all things relating to identity and expression, especially within our legal industry. And so we will dive right in. You know, even in this day and age, it's shocking that I love the last panel talking through, one thing that has improved for women over the years. And even despite all of those improvements, women still face incredible challenges, especially in our industry. I want to do a quick show of hands. How many women have been mistaken for a court reporter, for an assistant, or something of that nature? Okay. So it's interesting to me that, still in this day and age, we face a whole lot of, we face a lot of challenges in many different avenues. I want to share one quick personal story about a challenge that I faced early in my career. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Canadian and I'm Chinese. And so Canadians tend to be really nice. And Chinese people sometimes are quiet. Very early in my career, I had a senior litigator come and tell me that I had expressed a desire to do litigation, and I was flat out told, you will not be successful in litigation. You're too nice, you're too quiet, you're too kind, you're not aggressive enough. And it was hard to hear as a young lawyer because you do take a lot of what people say, especially when you're young, to heart. And so, today we'll be talking a lot about different challenges that folks have faced and what we can kind of do to ensure that everybody feels comfortable to express themselves and to be themselves. As we kick off, I want to turn it over to each of our folks to talk through just an example of one challenge that each of you have faced in this environment, in this industry, and how that experience has really shaped who you've become. So Kalila, I'm going to turn and start with you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's so great to be here. As a Black woman and a younger Black woman, we've talked about generational status. As a millennial, I feel like I face challenges every day. But I am a magistrate at Cleveland Municipal Court. I'm the senior magistrate, so even in a position of authority, still being able to face challenges day in and day out. But one of the significant challenges I can think of, I remember when I was ascending in my career, in the legal career, someone had approached me and they asked me, how did you get here? And I was kind of like taken aback, like, how did I get here? And they were like, well, who do you know? What's your last name? Who are your parents? How did you get in this position? And I was so confused. I'm a first generation college student, first person in my family to get a 4-year degree, let alone go along to law school. And what I found, especially in our culture within the community, there can be a lot of nepotism and a lot of cronyism. And a lot of times people feel like you don't belong in spaces if you don't have a specific last name, or you're not associated with a certain family, or you don't know whoever to get you in a position. And so I kind of answered that question and said, well, my credentials got me to where this is. I'm fully qualified to be in this position. Why would I not be? And it was kind of hard to hear because you feel like you don't deserve to be in certain spaces because you may look different. You don't know the culture. And I feel like that's something we have to break as women, as Black women, to occupy spaces and feel like we deserve to be where we're at.
those types of situations, just one interaction can make you question things. It can make you, I don't think a lot of people think about it day to day, but when those are the interactions that you're having, they really make you question why,
Am I supposed to be here?
exactly, am I supposed to be here? Imposter syndrome, all those types of things. Lorraine, we're going to turn to you for a challenge that you face.
If I could piggyback on the conversation about imposter syndrome, somewhere in the last couple of months, I came upon where that phrase came from. And I think the study suggested that they were looking at a certain group of people, and I believe it was white men. And I think so many other people focus on imposter syndrome. They're women, they're people of color. But I would argue that it's not imposter syndrome that we take on ourselves. It is imposed upon us. When people ask you questions like, how did you get here? If you didn't even have that internal conversation in your own head, they're saying it out loud for you, right? And to Amanda's point about being told what type of practice group she could be a part of or pursue for her career, I can start with the beginning of my career, at least in the prosecutor's office. There was a time when we handled cases for children and family services, and I remember showing up to court at the old Whitlatch building, that's how old I am, before they built the new building on Quincy. And I wore a suit every day because I'm a Gen X and that's what we were told to do, so that's what I do. Well, not anymore, but then I did. And I remember coming with a social worker, and I think it was a white guy, and he had on khakis and a blue shirt, the uniform. And when we walked into court, everyone assumed that the white male with his khakis on was the attorney. And I'm thinking, I am in a full Ralph Lauren pinstripe suit. Like, are you really asking him that? But I would say for me personally, having been an attorney for over 20 years, the way that I process it is that my joy is important to me. So I have to figure out what is something to complain about and what is something not to complain about. So for me personally, I have to pick and choose my battles to maintain my sanity and to maintain my peace. And I think that one thing that I focus on, especially when I'm encouraging new lawyers in our office, women, people of color, is that you have to decide how you want to show up, right? You have to decide your brand. And some of the other panelists, are probably familiar with the concept of the angry Black woman, right? It's this narrative that we're sassy, we're going to have an attitude, we're going to be loud, we're going to be aggressive. And that might have been me in my teens, but I'm a woman of a certain age, so I'm not like that anymore. But at least in my professional career, if you ask 100 people who know me, they've never heard me raise my voice. They've never heard me use profanity. But I think I can still be effective, firm, friendly. One last story, a female deputy said to me one time, she said, "What are you doing over there, Lorraine?" I said, "I'm just sitting here pre-trying cases." And she said, "You're over there being nicey." And I was like, "What?" She said, "Nicey, nice, nasty." I'm friendly with people, but I'm firm. And I think that you can do that and just sort of maintain your balance and boundaries with people, right? Figure out what you want to correct people about. Kalila and I used to work together. She's been called me, I've been called her. We've been called random Black women who do not match our shape, size, color, none of that. And I say things like, "No, you want the other Black girl." I mean, just confront people with their problematic behavior. So you have to find out when and where you do it, but you do have to confront it.
Thank you so much for just allowing me to be with these diamonds, as I like to think of them, in their own fields. My name is Juanita Obrant. I just happen to be the only elected official up here, but as a lawmaker, I can definitely tell you there are so many spaces. When you first become elected to being a state rep, one of the first decisions you make, even before you get staff, is determining what committee you want to sit on. So I not only wanted to be on the agriculture committee, I wanted to be the ranking member on the agricultural committee. And at that time, there had been, excuse my language to our one fellow that's in here, it had always been an older white dude who would always sit as the ranking member on the agriculture committee. And I remember telling my minority leader, I said, "Hey, I've done 4-H for 14 years. My family has owned a farm. This is what I want to do. I know this. I know this like the back of my hand. Anybody who's done 4-H, FFA, so we got some, so you know about the county fairs. It's a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. So I remember telling them that, and it was like, the guy that I replaced cried in caucus. Cried. And he never, for like the first couple months, he never helped me. So every meeting I went to with the Pork Association, the soy and wheat, he would never help me. And I would have to figure out these relationships on my own. And I remember I came up with flashcards because I did not want to go into any more rooms not knowing who the people were. And I knew nobody was going to help me because I had to prove that I was more than good enough to be in these spaces. And so I didn't realize when I asked for that I was going to be the first woman to be the ranking member on agriculture, which I still am at the State House. So sometimes when we ask to be in these spaces, we're not looking to be the first. It's like, no, these are my credentials. Like I've been doing this. I know ag better than this dude that wants this so bad, but he didn't know agriculture. You can't tell me you haven't gone to a county fair, the state fair. I mean, you haven't been part of the junior fair, and then you haven't been to the science fair. I mean, you can't say you want to be over the ag committee and you haven't done all those things. So I think in a sense of like, I knew my stuff. And so I had to remind myself when other people didn't know that, Juanita, you got this. Don't worry about if you are not the box that they were expecting to receive, you are the box that you are coming in, you know this. And so you have to remind yourself sometimes that packages of what people are expecting, they may look different, but you are the perfect package for your story of what people should be expecting.
That's really helpful insight, all three of you. I think it's really hard, probably for everyone in this room, it's hard to be in spaces and feel confident enough to kind of do what you do with confidence and really be able to be comfortable with your identity and be able to express that. I know as a young lawyer, I didn't feel comfortable doing that at all. I felt like there was an image that a lawyer should be because that's what I heard from others or that's what I saw elsewhere. So as we kind of look to move forward, I'd love to get some insight from all three of you. With folks who are earlier in their careers, I think a big problem that folks face, or the challenges that are kind of one of the biggest challenges to be addressed, at least when I was young, was kind of figuring out your identity and then feeling comfortable enough to express yourself. There are a lot of, we're going to talk about a lot of different nuances in your self-expression in the workplace, but just generically, I'd love to hear some feedback from these ladies, just as to general guidance you'd have for individuals. I do feel like for myself, it took years of just kind of being in the space to get comfortable with that. But is there other feedback that you'd have for folks, especially maybe the younger or the more junior folks that are early in their careers, to kind of get to that place where they can identify who they are and feel like they can express themselves freely in the workplace?
I think a lot of it starts with confidence, just the confidence that you have to have. And it's easy to say, oh, be confident, walk in that room, own the room. But just like Juanita said, it's like you have to have these pep talks with yourself, and you're patting yourself on your back and you're telling yourself, I belong here, I deserve to be in this space, and I'm going to make sure that, any space I walk into, that I make sure I show up as my true self. And again, it's so easy to say to show up as yourself, but a lot of times when you receive so much backlash or you have so many people it feels like that are not rooting for you, you need allies in spaces. And like Lorraine previously stated, she used to be my supervisor. We worked together in the prosecutor's office. And so it's more so you have to exist in spaces when you have people that support you. That's also a part of the confidence. It's not just how I feel, but do I have support? Do I feel like I have someone I can go to that's also backing me up? If I have to make decisions or, I'm thinking twice about something, do I have someone in my ear that's saying, no, Kalila, you are right. You weren't wrong in that situation. That's accurate. Stand on, what you believe. I think that's so important in workplaces to have those mentors and those allies that you feel like you can go to when you do feel that little bit of lack of confidence to be your true self?
I would say for me, having a village of people who all has a girls group chat of coworkers. Okay, so I'm not alone. So I have a group chat. I have actually about 4 of them that sit in my phone. They're all in Signal. I suggest everybody gets on Signal because you guys are all attorneys. You'll thank me later. But I am in this group chat, and I have a group chat of ladies that I'm with at the State House, other state rep and state senators are in other states, and then I have a bunch of girlfriends who are just prosecutors, they're attorneys, they're just great boss ladies, and they are my accountability partners in this space. And then when life is lifing, because life is lifing for all of us. Who's had a situation, you might have had your guy, your husband get on your nerves before you got here? Okay, maybe I'm just the one going through stuff. Okay, so everybody else has got perfect relationship, but you're dealing with life, and sometimes you need those set of people that you have within that village of accountability for stuff who will also be willing to check you and say you're wrong. Because you don't just need the people praising you, but you also sometimes need people to say, Juanita, you might want to readdress how you did that, or you need to get yourself prepared. Hence why I have flashcards of people's pictures before I go into meetings now, because I was like, why does everybody know each other? And my friend was like, because they are prepared for the meeting, you're not prepared. I was like, and so having that group chat, which I still hold dearly, was a game changer for me of accountability. And even if they're not particularly always people that's in your immediate workplace, you probably have friends that are at other firms that are dealing with the same stuff. Nothing's new underneath the sun. I promise you that. Also, when it comes to being with your identity, I love the color yellow. I'm very unashamed about it. I just happen to be wearing a yellow shirt. My purse is over there, it's yellow. My umbrella is yellow. My makeup bag is yellow. I really do like yellow. And I do this for security reasons. I love the color yellow, but I also do it for security reasons, because if someone picks up my stuff, I know that you picked up my yellow bag.
Right.
So, and that's become part of my identity. So it's interesting now, my colleagues will pick out something yellow for me because they know that's part of my identity, where that's what I want. And so if you stick with your identity, eventually people will act accordingly, because that's how you have identified as. So if you want coffee every day with 1 cup of cream, 2 sugars, you keep doing that, being consistent with your identity, and that's what part of your identity is being consistent with it. Other people will make adjustments too. So you sometimes wonder, why aren't people reacting a certain way? Because you have not been consistent with your identity. You ever thought about that? And so we have to be consistent with that. My colleagues, for one, know my hair is going to change. I have another hair appointment. My hair is going to look different on Monday. They have to get used to that. That is part of my identity. And so all of those things of identity is consistency. That's really the biggest thing about your identity, is being consistent, having that people who are going to hold your ladder, no matter if it's a good girlfriends group or accountability partner or a mentor. That's all part of your identity of how you make this work within your stuff. Be consistent.
To Amanda's point, she said something about what kind of advice would I give to young lawyers. I actually tend to supervise newer lawyers. So when I'm supervising them, whether it's men or women, but mostly women, especially people of color, I tell them, when you encounter these defense attorneys, they're going to want to know your tells, right? They're going to want to know, what is the thing that's going to trigger you? You know, if they try to insult your intelligence, or they try to insult your appearance, if they just try to do anything to get you off your game, you need to figure out, what are those things that people are going to say that are going to set you off? Are you a short person? Are you a tall person? Are you, whatever the thing is that they know that they can pick at you and take you, I call it outside your hookup. When they can get you outside of your element about how you normally behave, they've won, right? It's like a chess match. And I try to tell people all the time, oh, this person's going to say this person's going to do that. Because when she talks about nothing being new under the sun, I've been around for a little while, so I know a lot of these people, and I try to prepare them that this is how they're going to approach you, because you show up in this box. And so I do give different advice to different people based on how they show up. To Amanda's question about what kind of advice I give them, besides that, like for me personally, I've been this person since I was in 3rd grade, right? So I didn't really have to work on my self-esteem, like I was full of it. And so I try to encourage other people to get where I am. I'm not saying I don't have bad days where someone says something mean or hurts my feelings, But you do also have to process through that. And I think one way to be confident is to also be humble, right? Like, I don't know everything. I don't aspire to act like I know everything, because I think that's setting everybody up for failure. So when you're comfortable, when she talks about being in your own skin, I've changed my hair a lot.
I think we all do.
And I don't anymore because I'm tired and busy, but I used to. And I think that you have to focus on just making sure that you're comfortable in however you show up. And that might not be how other people expect you to show up, but you really have to just sort of sit in the confidence of it. I was telling Amanda this story that when I first interviewed at a law firm many years ago, I had micro braids in my hair, really big law firm, which I won't name. And my credentials were the same as the person that they hired. I know because I knew that person personally, had known her for years. They hired her instead of me. I think I'm wildly charismatic, but I think the difference was that my hair was braided, and I was okay with that. I said, you know what? If you don't want to hire me because of how I choose to wear my hair, I don't think I would be comfortable working there. And that's okay. I mean, this was 1990, blah, blah. And then I would say the other piece is interviewing at another firm. I kind of had my hair like this, which is how it grows out of my head. But 20 some odd years ago, the regimen, as some of the other panelists spoke about, pantyhose and ties and skirt suits, was for women of color to have straight hair. So that requires blow drying and flat ironing and things of that nature. And I wasn't interested. And I remember my mother saying to me, she goes, "Are you going to this interview with your hair like that?" I said, "Yes, I am." I said, "If they want a straight hair model, they can hire somebody else. But if they're looking for a lawyer, they might hire me." And they did hire me. So I think you just have to figure out what these things are when she talks about just pushing the envelope, saying I want 6 months, saying I want 12 hours. You have to figure out, I don't think my ability to do my job changed because of how my hair looked. But you have to recognize for your clients, that could be a different story. So when I had cases in Kentucky or Tennessee, I was very cognizant that how I chose to wear my hair could affect our clients. And so, you just have to think about these things and balance what's important for you. And it's harder to do as a younger person, but the sooner you can do it, the better for you.
And I just wanted to piggyback off that. I think you set the tone for how you want people to treat you. You have to set that expectation. You set the tone. Just like my panelists have said, I interviewed for a position and I had my hair naturally meaning word curly, how it grows out of my head. And it was in the pandemic, and so we were a little more relaxed. I didn't even think about my hair, and I know we're going into the hair topic, but somebody was like, "Oh, well, you didn't straighten your hair, you didn't do such and such to your hair." I was like, "My hair is fine. I just wore it curly, how it grows out my scalp." And it wasn't even a second thought in my mind that this person may not hire me because of what my hair looks like. But I say that to say, because again, it's an internal confidence. If I want to wear my hair natural and curly, how it grows out one week, and today I want it straight, and next week I want braids, that's my prerogative, that's my business. You don't question it. You don't have a right to question it. I'm showing up, doing my job how I'm supposed to. But the expectation is, oh, when we see Kalila, she might have this hair this week. She might have this next week, because that's who I am and that's how I show up. And so that's the tone I set, and people treat you accordingly.
It's a fantastic segue, ladies. Our next, what we're going to move into is, some of the different challenges with respect to expression in the workplace come in all different forms and shapes. Juanita, you are a primary sponsor for the Ohio Crown Act. So can you tell all the folks in the audience a little bit about what the Ohio Crown Act is about and its purpose?
Thank you so much. And so the Crown Act, I'm going to just tell you a little bit of the history of it. The Crown Act, it stems from, for one, I'm a person who wears my hair different types of ways. My hair is very natural. And we do not want to have to deal with workforce discrimination when you come and wear your hair in its natural state. And you have jobs that will say, "Hey, I need your hair straightened." I've experienced that in my own lifetime. And I was like, I don't know who this hiring manager is, but this dude just said I need to wear my hair straight. Y'all need to fire him. He got fired because I knew the right people. But a lot of people don't always have that opportunity to be able to stand up for themselves. And there were situations going across the nation where even students in the United States, where one young guy was wearing locks. He was
Texas.
wrestling. Yes. And they made him cut off his locks while he was wrestling. So we have to have things put in place within the law to say that that has to be an acceptable form of way that you can sue people if they are formally discriminating against you in schools or also in the workplace, and that's where the Crown Act stemmed from. So it's been passed in quite a few states. It started off in California, but now we are slowly trying to march it through Ohio to address that now too. But I will say this much. This is the beginning of my 6th year in the State House. This is my 3rd time introducing this bill. I finally have a man who has a ponytail who is my joint sponsor. And I'm saying this intentionally because it took for the Speaker of the House, let me tell you, the Speaker of the House tried to cut his ponytail off during session. That's how he became my joint sponsor. That happened on the House floor, and then he was like, Juanita, I'll do the bill with you.
It is unbelievable to me that that's sometimes what it takes to spark change. It does take a personal level of investment. You talked a little bit about the federal or kind of other states and how there is an act that's actually passed in multiple states, and this is kind of along that same road. Share with us a little bit, if you will, why this act is meaningful to you, the personal significance, and why you are bringing this for the 3rd time.
It's a personal story. It's definitely a personal story. Growing up as a kid, my hair has been in braids. It has been in a fro. Every hairstyle you can think of, it has been. And I'm so fortunate, and I feel like a little bit of privilege that I can wear my hair in all different types of ways, but I know it's so many women who run for office who will only wear their hair straight. And so even running for office, people say, like, people are not going to elect you if you don't wear your hair straight. If you come out with your hair looking natural, if it's in a braid or in this form or that, and I want people to see me. I want people to see me, and I knew that was not always the case when I wore my hair differently, that they put you in a box. And so legally, you should not be working at a call center, which is what's happened. A lady was working at a call center. She came back to work with braids, and they fired her. That was one of the cases that sprawled off the Crown Act. What about wearing braids at a call center has to do with you working your job? Who is that affecting? And so there's so many people who don't always feel seen, but they've lost their places, their work, their jobs because of that. So it's very personal, because life could be lifing, and I too could be in a situation where my employer could say, hey, I don't want you wearing braids. I do not want you wearing your hair in its natural state, and you have to come to work with your hair straight. That is a real thing. And I'm all for about people, jobs making accommodations. So even if you're working with food and your hair is really long, I'm okay with people having a hairnet, but no one should be saying that your hair, your micro braids that you just took 12 hours getting done have to be cut short because of their fear. So it's very personal, and I think there's so many women that can relate to that, not even just Black women. When I introduced the bill, believe it or not, I had a lot of Jewish women who reached out to me because they have very coarse hair, and they were going through the time where they were dealing with relaxers. I didn't know they were getting relaxers. This was new to me. And because they were dealing with their own level of discrimination, because all of their hair came out looking like froze if they did not relax their hair. And they felt seen in that bill. So even though we do see a lot of correlation with this bill with, Black and brown, particularly Black women, but this is a bill that affects everyone who does not feel seen in the workplace and who's feeling they're being discriminated against when it comes to their hair.
And at its core, it's an interesting issue. The hair itself, it can take significant time to change it, or you have to make permanent changes to be a certain way. But you see it manifested in many different ways and expression in the workplace. So things like, I heard a talk recently about how exhausting it can be just putting on a shell. So sometimes it feels like, especially when I was early in my career, it feels like you have to put on a costume, put on a face, and kind of put on the self that you're expected to be at work. And that gets exhausting. Lorraine, you mentioned it earlier, consistency. Actually, I'm trying to remember. I know we were talking a little bit about consistency earlier, and I'm going back to just the idea that to be consistent is less exhausting because you can be yourself all the time. But if you have to be different people at different times, and one of those being at the workplace, it can be quite a drain. So thank you for talking through the Ohio Crown Act. It's a very interesting aspect of the expression in the workplace piece. We're going to talk a little bit about another piece of expression, so linguistic and language expression in the workplace. I personally find this to be a very interesting topic because I have 2 kids. I have a daughter and a son, and at home we speak English and Chinese. So when they were growing up, it was really interesting to watch a child learn language. For a long period of time, they didn't understand context. And so at school, they'd say the Chinese words that we would use at home all the time. And it was very frustrating to them that nobody would understand them and they'd have to kind of adjust. They quickly learned the context, but I don't think that's a whole lot different than some of the issues that we face in the workplace in terms of contextual learning and kind of learning what you can say and how you can say things in different ways in different situations. Kalila, I'm going to turn to you initially for this linguistic piece. Will you talk through a little bit about language and linguistics in terms of expression and freedom of expression in the workplace, and potentially how that could be an avenue of challenges?
I grew up hearing this a lot, and my panelists can probably back me up and agree. Or how many of you have ever heard the phrase, you sound very articulate. You speak very well. For who? Like, I speak very well for who? For myself, like, who are we comparing my speech to? And but that's an issue we face. It's a comparison of how I'm supposed to show up and speak. And this panel is about authenticity and identity and how I feel comfortable showing up. And if I have to change my tone, if I have to change my speech, and how many people heard of code switching? Okay, code switching, basically, it's a terminology that was brought up where I have to speak differently and present differently when I'm in a different setting than maybe when I'm with my girlfriends or in a private setting, that I have to maybe soften my tone, that I may have to smile a little bit more, be a little more gentle when I speak, because I don't want to come off aggressive or angry or upset. And it's really inappropriate, because if that's not who I am and I'm trying to communicate something to you in a way that I'm comfortable, in the way I am authentically who I am, that's the only way I can give it to someone. But there's that expectation that you don't want to be the angry Black woman. It's so interesting. I had a situation even at work this week where I had to have a conversation with someone, and it's like, we have to practice what we're gonna say, because I had an incident and I was like, this is so wrong, this was inappropriate, this person shouldn't have done this, and how do I address it? So speaking with another colleague, it's like, okay, well, let's practice. What are we gonna say? How did that come across? How did that sound to you? And they're like, okay, maybe change that, maybe fix that. But it's so exhausting, because it's like, why do we even have to do this? If I have a problem with something and I need to communicate it to you, I need to be able to say it without you perceiving that I'm angry or that I'm upset or that I'm being confrontational. Because that's another phrase that we hear a lot, like, oh, Black women can be so confrontational. And it's like, no, it's not confrontational. If I have an issue, we're going to address it, and then we can move on from it. And there's nothing angry about what I said, and I'm not upset about anything that I said. I do think a benefit of being who you are authentically is being able to deal with the public. I'm a public servant. We deal with the public every single day, especially pro se litigants. I love the way that I don't have to code switch in my role to where I can communicate with the public. I can make them feel comfortable enough to let their guard down, to talk to me. Being in a courthouse is intimidating in and of its own. People don't want to come to the Justice Center. They're scared, they're concerned. And then to think I have to speak in a certain tone, I have to use certain adjectives and words for someone to believe that I'm intelligent. That's not okay. And so I want to be able to communicate with someone where none of that is an issue. Tell me who you are, what's going on with your case, how we can address it and how we can fix it. And I want to do it in a way where I make you feel comfortable, and we can get the job done successfully. But linguistically, there are challenges that we face every day in our profession.
Excuse me, when we were talking about this, it made me laugh because I thought about a story. I had attended a deposition in Lorain County, and I was coming back across 90, and there were troopers everywhere. So when I got back to the firm, I said to one of these partners, I said, "Oh my," I was like, "the popo was everywhere." And he looked at me like I was smoking crack. And I was like, "Why are you looking at me like I'm smoking crack?" That's actually what I said to him. And I realized that he didn't know what I was talking about. And he liked me a lot. And I was comfortable being myself and just trying to communicate this piece of information to him. But and we learned. And I say that to say, I also speak to my family in ways that are authentic to me. So if I have a cousin who's got a GED, I'm going to use the word vernacular, right? And I'm going to explain to her what that word means. So I think that authenticity, is so much easier than having to vacillate and, always be on guard for making sure that you are showing up in a way that is professional. I mean, I would argue that professionalism is oftentimes defined by other people, and that's a social construct that doesn't really resonate with reality, right? Like whether my dress is black or I have a black suit on as opposed to separates doesn't affect my ability to articulate myself so well in court. And so I had an interesting conversation with one of my colleagues maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was two colleagues, and we were having a discussion, and I think it was a very transparent discussion with these colleagues, and they felt comfortable enough with me to express the fact that they did not know that when people of color, mostly Black, speak Ebonics, that they were oftentimes also well educated. I'm gonna let that sit for a couple seconds. And I really appreciate their transparency because they know me well enough that I'm not super judgy. I keep stuff in a vault, Vegas rules, and they can talk to me about what they have to say. And I appreciated that because that is a real experience for them. And what one person told me was they heard a Black person speaking in Ebonics, but they also knew that that person was very well educated and could speak differently, and that it was a conscious choice. And so for me, that was just a really good moment to kind of sit in that space where they could express something that they learned to me, and that for me to have that knowledge that that is how some non-minority people perceive people of color. So that was just a very interesting experience, and I appreciated them sharing it. Ebonics is a conscious choice for a lot of us. Thanks.
But a lot of it is just, I'm sorry, Anita. A lot of it is just conversation just like this and being open and candid and making sure everyone on each side feels safe enough to say exactly what they're thinking. Don't sugarcoat it. Just say it, and we can have a conversation and explain, and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Being at the State House, and when I'm in committee hearings, they put our committee hearings and sessions on live TV, and a lot of times when people hear me talk, I'm always talking to the people at home. I'm not talking to my colleagues. So my vernacular of what I'm saying, I might use something, or I might say something like the popos, or my man, because the people at home in my district are gonna know what those slangs are. And so at the same time, I'm also making sure that I'm educating my colleagues, because these are cultural expressions that are very culturally based, because there's 99 of us. So not everybody's gonna have the same sayings within their districts. And so that's how I have to explain it to my colleagues. I'm talking to the people at home in my district, and they understand me when I say something like that. So we have to understand that we might have to take a moment to pause to kind of explain to people, especially when people look confused. Like you had to explain what the popos is. I explained my man, and my colleagues was like, what is she talking about, her man? Like, is you talking about him being a man? And I was like, no, my man, like my boo thing, my boyfriend, my I just had to go down the whole thing of just explaining all of that. And so it's important that if you are choosing to have the different vernaculars speaking about different things, that you also don't be hurt to explain it to other people, because culturally we were all so different from each other. And I've always been so very comfortable, shout out to Beaumont, hey girl, hey. Going to an all-girls school, I've always been very comfortable, just in general, no different. I'm a whole state rep with Converse's on. So I've always been a person who's just been very comfortable but also realizing that other people might not always understand, but always be willing to explain to to make sure that we're all together at the end of the conversation. What can make it even worse is that if you are saying something, if the person you're saying it to does not understand it, then you have to make them understand what you're trying to explain culturally so people can be culturally competent with you. Because not everybody's going to be culturally competent with things. Just like I talked about, I was telling somebody, oh, I'm about to go eat some greens. They was like, greens? This literally happened at the State House. We were trying to get a caterer, and I was like, we can just get some greens. And they was like, are you talking about a crayon? This is a full grown man. He got a wife. He got children. He's on leadership. You just saw him last night at the State of the Union. He's a whole whatever. We had to explain what greens was, and we had to just talk about where the words greens came from. And, we talked about turnips and mustards and the difference between that and kale and spinach. This is a real conversation.
History lesson.
It was a history lesson. We had to talk about slavery. We talked about all of that, just trying to get something catered. But it just got really deep. But I was not going to change up how I expressed talking about greens because he didn't understand it. But I was like, well, after you leave this conversation, you're going to know what greens are. And if somebody says we want to eat some greens, you're going to know what that means. So the biggest lesson I say is that being true to you is the most important thing, because I'm not going to change up how I say it, but I'm going to make sure you understand what I'm saying if you don't understand it, because I am an intellectual too. And so that is the thing of just everybody being very culturally competent, is that when we hear people say things differently than how we're used to people saying it, is that we take a moment, pause, and maybe ask people, so can you explain that to me? Because I'm not I've never heard somebody express it that way. So that's the pushback I sometimes give to my colleagues who maybe never heard of the word greens before, or maybe heard somebody say my man, my man, my man. That's really off of Instagram and TikTok. Have anybody heard that before? See, I got a couple people. So when I say that to my staff, and she just got proposed to, and I was like, my man, my man, my man, my man. And the other people are like, what is she talking about? So I need those moments for you to ask me, what does that mean? And not just assume that I'm on some crazy tangent, but to really just understand so we can all be a part of this, because I'm still going to be me. But if you want to be part of this world, which I feel like is an awesome world, come in and ask me a question. Ask me a question, because I would love to explain my man, my man, my man, what greens are and what the popos are. Thank you.
And I just want to also follow up, because it really is two different languages. I remember when I worked in the prosecutor's office and somebody asked me a question and I didn't know, should I be offended? Because they asked me to translate a jail call. They're like, oh, we have this jail call. We're listening, to this defendant and somebody else talk. And I don't understand the vernacular, what they're saying and what this means. And I think I even came to you and says, I'm like, Lorraine, they just asked me to translate a jail call. I'm not the Black Dictionary. Why are you coming to me asking me to translate? But then, the bigger picture is, this is the type of case it is. We need to be able to understand communication and what's being said. And they honestly had no idea. So we're literally listening to the call and we're going piece by piece, literally like it's a second language for them to be able to explain. But even in the same way with our victims, because again, being a public servant, and when I was working in the prosecutor's office, we would have victims that would come in and maybe not be able to fully articulate or communicate what happened to them. So having to bring in someone from a diverse background, which is why diversity is important all across the board in firms, public, private, because we have to be able to relate to everybody. And if you can't do something as basic as communication to be able to empathize and understand someone's situation, what are we doing as lawyers and attorneys trying to administer justice? It's just not possible.
That's a great point, and I know we just got the prompt that we have a couple minutes left, but I want to stay on this communication piece for 1 minute before we do one closeout question for everyone. Before, when we were preparing for the session, Lorraine, we had talked a little bit about the AI and technology implications and some of the linguistic, the challenges that might be faced with respect to technology and AI. Could you share a little bit about some of those challenges and how that might actually have implications with respect to AI and technology?
Sure. AI might feel like it's coming out of left field, but just the background, we thought technology was going to be the theme of the day. So that's why we talked about AI. But what I brought to the conversation is just that when we're all talking about Chat GPT and producing all of these different materials, there have been a lot of people of color who are kind of crying in the wilderness about the data that's going in, and that data is being populated by mostly white men in California, in Silicon Valley, and I guess globally. And so the concern is that if you don't have more diverse people populating the information that's a part of AI, then the things that they're going to produce will reflect that. And so the phrase that I came up with is garbage in, garbage out, right? Like it's only going to be as reflective as the people who input the information. So that was just a concern that I had read an article or two about, and I thought, yeah, it will be very interesting. There's things as basic as certain software programs not being able to recognize people of color and their skin tones. They see certain women who might be black and brown and have non-small features, at least facial features, and they're misidentifying them as men. And also that law enforcement with some of their surveillance are getting it wrong because they haven't put in the data to reflect different populations. So that was just the point that I wanted to raise, that, this issue of diversity is a part of the AI situation, and that it will affect the outcomes that we get.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We are getting the prompt that we have completed our time. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in with us. And thank you, ladies, so much for sharing today.
Thank you.
We have Patrice Blakemore, Senior Vice President of Equity Inclusion at the Greater Cleveland Partnership. Myra Barsoom Stockett, the Cleveland partner in charge of Perez Morris, and our moderator, who's Renee DeLuca Dolan, President of Contempo Designs and Communications.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, my husband says he can hear me across the office, so I always have to close my door. So maybe the mic is not needed. But thank you, everybody, for coming out. This is the first live event I've been to since 2019. I know. Isn't that crazy? I live in Chardon and I work in Warrensville Heights, and I typically go to work in my pajamas. So I'm super excited to be here. I run a design business. Just a quick overview. I published a magazine for women in business for 10 years, and I've done about 65 plus events in my career. One that was for female entrepreneurs. The last event we had, there were 600 women there. So this is really fun to be back, just networking and seeing people. So I'm going to get to it. I think we're a little bit behind the schedule. So first question, and it's for all of us. I was asked to also participate since there's only 3 of us, but I'll try not to as much as possible. How do you support other women in the workplace and fellow entrepreneurs? So Patrice, you want to go first?
So when I think about support, I think about who are we as leaders? Who are the leaders that have meant a lot to us? What did they do? How did they support us? And then pouring into other women. So being secure enough to know that you are not the only person that should shine in your firm or your organization or the company that you work at, but that you should be creating a path for others to follow as well.
Hi, everyone. Oh, mine's working. Use mine next time. So again, Myra Barsoom Stockett from Perez Morris. Thank you for having us. My firm, I think, really tries to do a lot to support women, and we've got some women here from the firm, which is great to see. We try and really encourage women in our law firm. Number one, I think for all women here, it's really important to, if you've ever had a mentor, to serve as a mentor and to have an open door policy, and to, when people reach out to you, go out for lunch, go out for coffee, serve as mentors to younger women. Number one, I think it's really an obligation for all women. Things that my firm tends to do. Number one, we're part of a firm called NAMWOLF, which is, I wrote it down just so I didn't forget, National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms. So anytime we've got a conflict, we'll look to the NAMWOLF group and we'll try and refer any cases that we can to the firms that are like ours. Another thing we try and do is enroll women once a year. There's a group called Ladder Down. It's a great organization for women. I've never done it, but we've had a few people from our firm who've partaken in it. And it's a one-year program that tries to help women teach you leadership skills, developing those skills, marketing skills, networking skills. So things that I think are really important for all female lawyers.
Thank you.
And Renee, you forgot the shout out for the jackets.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Myra and I are wearing jackets brought to you by Valerie Mayen. Where is she? Fashion designer, stylist. I've known Valerie for many, many years, and I'm glad to see she's back with brick and mortar, and her clothes are outside the door and worth taking a look at before you go. So thanks, Myra. Okay, so second question, are you involved in any networking groups that might help women in the workplace as far as lawyers or entrepreneurs with their mission as they move along in their careers? I've been involved in women's groups probably since I started my business. I used to work at American Greetings before I went out on my own. There's a few, again, I don't think they're specific to the legal profession, but Women in Networking has been around for a long time, probably 25 years. They have an East Side, West Side location. And then NABO, the National Association of Women Business Owners, is actually a national organization that I've dipped in and out of. But there seems to be a lot of smaller women's groups that I'm seeing on LinkedIn and some other platforms that are gathering for breakfast, lunch, happy hour, that all have different missions, but at the end of the day, I think they're all supporting other women in business. So I think it's a great opportunity to just network with other women in Northeast Ohio. So that was an easy one. So we talked a little bit as a group, if you've taken any continuing education or certificate programs that have helped you in your career that you might want to share with the group.
So I have a little circuitous route. I used to practice law at the prosecutor's office in Dayton, Ohio. My husband and I moved here to Cleveland. I stayed home for 10 years, also had my consulting firm, then decided to become a business advisor. I've been all over the place, right? And so when I think about what has changed the way that I see things is different classes. One in particular is called Lean Six Sigma. Has anybody heard of Lean Six Sigma? I'm the type of person where I do like structure, and I like to do things the same way. And so I was very particular about the way I did anything and everything. And then after taking this class, I was like, oh, I made up all those rules, and that is highly inefficient. And so it really shifted my paradigm about what I can do, how I can be more efficient in all of my roles, because Lean Six Sigma is all about how do I cut out the waste to be more efficient, and then how do I do the same thing every time so that I get the same result. And so that was a game changer for me, because that's not a type of training that you get as a lawyer, as you know. So it's a wonderful, wonderful training. It was a game changer.
You know, I try and always make sure to take continuing legal education in fields that are of interest, obviously. But the one thing I always tell people, aside from taking certificates and doing things like that, is every single thing you do, you are marketing yourself, both inside your firm and outside your firm. So I always try and encourage people, and I try and do it myself. Go out in society, get on boards, join organizations, join networks. The best thing to empower you is really getting out there and networking yourself.
As far as continuing education, this is actually how I met Patrice 7-8 years ago. I took the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program that was offered and still is through Tri-C for free, and it really changed my business and my career. And before that, I I'm busy, I run a business, I have a family, just like everybody in this room, and I hesitated, but I'm so glad that I did that. So that's a great program for anybody in the room who runs a small business or who is an entrepreneur, and I've taken many classes from Dale Carnegie, presentation classes, high impact presentation, sales training, because if you're running your own business, you are a salesperson all the time, every day, every time you see somebody, talk to somebody, you are quote unquote selling. So Dale Carnegie is a great one if you haven't looked into that or have any interest in high impact presentations and sales training. Myra, I think we were going to start with you on this. What's the greatest challenge, in your opinion, that women are facing in the workplace today? You had some statistics that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so I wrote down statistics that I think we as a group found very interesting. First of all, you've got 56% of women from about 2020 to the present graduating from law school. So based on that statistic alone, we should make up the majority of the workforce as it relates to law firms. 26.7% of partners in law firms are women. 23% are equity partners, and less than 5% female partners of color. 50% of associates are women. So you see, obviously, the trend. So what is it that makes it so hard for women to become partners? Why are the majority of women associates? And everybody's going to have their own story, but for me, what was most challenging when I graduated from law school, obviously it's a male-dominant industry, despite the fact that we make up more than half of the percentage of the graduating law school classes. But as a woman, we typically, if you get married and you have children, you're taking maternity leave. So for me, when I look back at my past, I had 3 children in about 5 years. So with that came with pregnancy when you're at work, which has its own challenges. Maternity leave. I chose to nurse for a year, come back from maternity leave. So in a 5-year period, I'm out of the office for 3 to 4 months each year. When I come back, I close my office door and I'm pumping in my office. I have an all-day mediation, literally have to excuse myself and find a private room so I can pump. So these are things that are hard for women. And then on top of that, you've got billable hours. And at the end of the day, to be a profitable firm, those things are important. But as a woman who's trying to balance a lot in life, making those billable hours it's a difficult thing. So I think those are challenges that all women face.
Patrice?
I'm going to take us a little bit off of the professional piece of it in terms of challenges and say, for me, one of the most important decisions I ever made was the person I married. My husband, and I'm going to preface by, I'm not talking about perfection. I'm talking about a teamwork. I'm talking about someone that can tag team. We have 3 kids, and there's nothing in the house that he doesn't do. There's nothing in the house that I won't do. It's a partnership. And when you have the support from your significant other, it makes all the difference. And if you're in a relationship where you don't have that support, you might need to have thoughts about what should my next moves be? Because you really do need to have that type of partner. So I was very, very clear about what I needed in my life as a partner because I had bad relationships before. And as I looked at those relationships, I said, oh, I'm the common denominator. Okay, maybe there's something about me that's attracting these types of people. And then I went in and did work on myself so that I could get the type of relationship, being the type of relationship that I deserved and that was going to support me and my family. So, as I think about challenges, it's really from the very beginning, who's supporting you personally in your life? What support system have you set up?
I'm a first-generation Coptic Egyptian, so I grew up in a very traditional household. My parents they were born and raised in Egypt, and so, again, very traditional household. My dad worked, my mom stayed home. And with that, back then, it was normal at the time, my mom had an allowance, a weekly allowance. She would go to the bank, she'd get her money out, and that's what she had. We have family back in Egypt where they don't have the same means that we do, and things that were very important to her was supporting her family. We've got a Christian orphanage in Egypt that my family runs that's also very important to my mom. And when she needed extra allowance money, she would have to go to my father and ask for money. So despite growing up in this very traditional household, I grew up with the moms telling me always, you have to have your own career. You have to. The most important thing that you're ever going to do is choose the person you're going to marry. Choose that person wisely. Never have to depend on anyone for money. And with that, as Patrice said, the person that you marry, if you are going to have a career outside the household, it's so important that you marry a true partner who's going to respect your career. My husband has his own business. He's very busy, but at the house, I don't want to say 50-50 partnership because there are times where he's doing 100% and times where I'm doing 100%. But I chose the person who I married who believed in my career, who respected the decisions that I made in life, who helped support me in the steps that I needed to do to be a lawyer and to work outside the home. And we were partners at home with kids' activities and everything that goes with that. So the person that you marry, you've got your partners at work, but you need a partner at home that's going to help you be successful as well.
Thank you. So the next question talked about how do you manage your personal and your professional responsibilities. So you both touched on those. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? I mean, that brings up the work-life balance. And when we had this conversation, at least as an entrepreneur, and I don't think it's any different for women in the workplace, is there is no work-life balance. I mean, you do what you have to do, and hopefully you're doing something that you love and enjoy at work. And when you go home, you do the things that hopefully you love and enjoy. I like to hike. I like to spend time outdoors. I like to spend time with my family. But I don't know, is there anything that has helped you guys manage your personal and professional responsibilities? I know you just talked about your partner, but...
I think that's a trick question because, we have 3 kids, and so at this point they're 21, 20, and then we have a 13-year-old. So we have 2 that are in college, and we have 1 that's home. And my girlfriends look at me because I do whatever I want. They were like, "Oh my God, you are living your best life," and I was like, "Oh my God, I know! This is amazing." But that's because I have 2 older kids who are not in the house. But when they were all in the house, we were in the thick of things. And so I would say that there was times like I would go out with my girlfriends, but it wasn't consistent. Now I can do what I want to do. I like roller skating. I go 3 times a week. I go wherever I want in the country. I travel all over the world. I really am living my best life. They were like, "Do you have a husband?" I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Okay, I'm gonna stay home." But I think it's the season. I really think it's the season that you're in because when my kids were little, I did do a lot with moms who stayed at home, but it was just a different expectation and responsibility. And then now I'm in a different phase of my life. So I think it depends on your phase, and you still should be taking time out for yourself regardless, but the amount of time is going to differ. So the time that I have to do what I want to, I have hours, whereas before I may have had 1 hour once a month.
So everybody always asks about life-work balance, and it's a hard question. There are a few things I will say. Number one, it's important when you're young to work hard. You've got to put the hours in, you got to work hard, but you always have to make sure that you're carving out time. Things that were always important to me is making sure that I was doing things with my family. So every year I would take at least 3 weeks of vacation because that was important to me. So I would carve that time out. I would always make sure that I would go somewhere with my husband and my kids, and those were things that are important to me. But everybody's got to figure out what's important to you, and then you've got to make sure that you're carving that time out. Anybody who knows me or anybody who's heard me speak before, I'm kind of like a broken record. One of the things that I always say, in order to really achieve work-life balance, I think one of the most important things as younger women is autonomy. And how do you get autonomy? Because when you're a young associate, you're going to be in your office on a Wednesday afternoon and somebody's going to come in and say, here's an emergency assignment, I need it by tomorrow. And you've got kids at home, or you've got a sporting event that you wanted to go to, or a play you don't want to miss, or a doctor's appointment. So how do you get to control your schedule? And the number one way is autonomy. And how do you get autonomy? It's networking yourself. It's getting your own clients. It's having your own book of business. That is how I think the best way to reach autonomy and the best way to really achieve that work-life balance, because now, guess what? You're in charge of your own schedule. You can decide the work that you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And you also become a valuable asset to wherever you're working. If you're in a firm, you've got your own book of business, you are now an important you're an important piece of that firm, and they're going to do everything they can to retain you. You also have a portable book of business you can leave at any time. So being out there, networking yourself, getting your own clients, having your own book of business, every single young attorney should strive for that. And I think, honestly, that helps you reach the work-life balance that you are looking for.
I had a follow-up question for you, Myra. So, I mean, because I used to do a lot of speaking in the past to women lawyers, and one of the things that they would say, it's hard to get a book of business. What is can you give one example of what you did to be able to get a client, to get one of your bigger clients? What did you need to do to get that?
Oh gosh, I have so many stories. One thing I will say is inside the office and outside the office, you're always representing yourself, your practice, your firm. Always go out, always be social. I mean, one of my very first big clients, funny enough, my next door neighbor was the CEO and president of the Plain Dealer. And so we became friends with them. And eventually I got my foot in the door, and that was one of the very first big clients that I brought to my firm, the Plain Dealer. Always look at yourself as a lawyer. Remember who you are outside the firm, inside the firm. Become friends with people. You get a client handed to you, or you get a case handed to you. Know your clients. Become friends with your clients. The firm that I used to work for, Reminger, was a big insurance coverage defense firm, and you've got an insurance company that they're not loyal clients. You make one mistake and you're fired. Get to know your clients. Become friends with your clients. It's so much harder to fire a friend than it is just your lawyer. So always make personal connections in everything you do.
Thank you. Because it's International Women's Day, I think we have to talk about mentorship and mentors. Is there anybody that's been in your lives, a woman who's been a mentor to you or has made a difference in your professional career?
I have had a lot of different mentors. In particular, I have a group of friends from college. So it's not professional mentorship, but they are professionals. And we talk on a monthly basis and we go through, okay, what's one personal goal or professional goal that you have? And we have an accountability because we have known each other over 30 years. We can call BS. I call BS. You didn't do it because you didn't want to do it. Now, what's the issue? And then we really get to the heart of the matter, and it has pushed us. And we kind of look back at some of our older goals that we had, and we're like, oh my gosh, we did that. It's having that accountability and also having a sounding board to say, hey, I'm having this issue at work. How do you think I should handle it? Because this is how I want to. And then they had to say, no, Patrice, you've been home too long. That is not professional. So having that sounding board has been just amazing. And then the other thing that I'll say is, I'll call them mentors, but they also were clients. And so having the opportunity, being given the chance to serve a client and understand that they have grace when mistakes were made, and also giving others grace when they make mistakes. So remembering that we all aren't perfect, and the time when someone gave me grace allows me to give grace to others.
I would say, like Patrice, I've had a network of mentors. And like Patrice, we would go out once a month. So we had a group that would go out once a month, and we would outline things that we wanted to accomplish. And one of the panelists before said, it's good to have mentors that are honest with you, that'll call you on your BS. That's so important. You don't want mentors that are just going to constantly tell you, you're great, you're great, you're great. You want mentors that are actually going to tell you, this is where you need improvement. This is what you need to do. So I was lucky enough where I had a group, and like I said, once a month, no matter what, we went out to either lunch or happy hour. We had our little notes, and we all worked together, actually, at the firm, and it was all different ages, and we always helped each other and called one another out and said, listen, this is going around the firm. People are saying you did A, B, C, and D. Get your shit together, literally. So it's important to surround yourself with people who are going to help you achieve what you want to achieve and call you out on things.
Yeah, I definitely have the network of women and friends I've had since elementary school, junior high, but I'd say there's two women for me that stick out. One is my mother, who was not educated past high school, was a cosmetologist her whole life, just retired when she was 80, single mom, raised 2 kids, worked 3 jobs. So, I mean, just she was my mentor because of what she did and how hard she worked. And then a woman that I worked for at American Greetings, I was 21 when I went to work there when I graduated, and I looked around and I thought, okay, there's a lot of men here, but that's fine, whatever, I get along. There were some women in the department, but most of my bosses were males, and then there was one woman there, and she was the president of Carlton Cards at the time, maybe 20 years my senior, maybe 30, and I didn't really realize it, but she was a very strong influence in my career. Just again, because of the way she handled herself. She was smart, she understood creative people, but she was very strategic. And to this day, we're still friends. So it's one of those things that grew over time, and it wasn't intentional. We didn't meet on a regular basis. Actually, I left. I had to leave the corporate environment after a couple of years, but we ran into each other probably 15 years after I left at Heinen's, and we just started talking and became friends, and now we go to art shows together, and she helps me with my business because she's retired. But anyway, those would be a couple mentors that I just wanted to mention. And then we wanted to talk about, we had a lot of other questions that we thought weren't important. So something that we talked about were maybe some tips or tactics that we could leave behind to all of you as sort of closing comments, because then we're going to take some questions from be a little interactive and wake all of you guys up. So Patrice, any takeaways or any last words of wisdom for the attendees?
Yes, be the change that you want to see in the world. One of the things that I value is candor. And so if in my role at the Greater Cleveland Partnership as a senior leader, if I see someone doing something that I'm kind of like, that's not a good look, I'm going to say something. And the reason that I say something is because I want them to learn from it. And I want them to have the opportunity to correct the behavior and be seen in the light that they should be seen in. So as you are in your positions, think about pulling someone aside when it's needed and giving some advice and giving some mentorship and guidance on creating that type of strong foundation that they're going to need to be able to succeed.
And on those same lines, I would say we are in a competitive field. Do not compete with the people you work with. Do not compete with the other women in your firm. Help raise one another up. When you've got somebody that's working with you or working under you or working above you, when you make them look good, that you're making yourself look good. So do everything you can to help each other and raise one another. Just like you might need help one day, help people. And when you need help, those people that you've helped are going to help you and help lift you up.
Okay, so we're going to open it up for audience questions. Does anybody have a question? Is that Valerie?
My question is about this idea of, I'm not a lawyer. I own my own business, but I definitely see a lot of parallels in women who own their own businesses, women in competitive fields like lawyers, in having a really hard time saying no. And I think for me personally, it's because, for lack of a better word, I don't want people to think I'm being a bitch, right? Like, I want to say yes to everyone because I want to be kind and generous and gracious and offer the resources that I wasn't given. But I have 2 kids under the age of 8. I run a business with a team of 5. I'm on, boards and volunteering, and it's really difficult to say no without feeling guilt. So I'm curious, what advice you might have to be able to know, aside from, your schedule not allowing you, how can you say no in a way that is gracious, but also efficient, and gets the point across that, like, hey, I'm not being a jackass, I just do not have the bandwidth. Does that make sense? Anyone else can relate?
I do not have the bandwidth.
Perfect.
You just answered your own question. Yeah, but I don't even think that's the issue, because you know how to say it because you just said it. I think that guilt is the issue, and anytime we make decisions out of fear, it is more times than not going to be the wrong decision. And so what you need to probably look at are, what are your values, and just suss out, what is it, like, from your values, what are the things that you enjoy doing and that you feel like that you want to do, volunteer work, and you just focus on that. And when you focus on that, you can say no to everything else. When people ask me to do things, let me switch it. If I ask someone to participate in a meeting or an organization, I much rather you tell me no than for you to tell me yes, and I have an expectation that you're going to show up and show out, and then you do nothing. No is an honest answer. And if you want to maintain your the way people see you and your persona, then, like that integrity piece, then just be honest with yourself and be honest with others, and they will respect you more. And I tell people, I said, you know what? I never want to say yes to something that I'm not going to follow through with. And people appreciate that. And I appreciate it because now I'm not pissed that I've said yes to something I don't want to do.
Yeah, and the other thing, Valerie, when you're saying, saying no, I always use, I'm sorry, I don't have the bandwidth. And people understand that. That's a very graceful way, and it's a very honest way. And so I'm not sure if you're talking about saying no for like work potential clients or your family or volunteer or everybody coming at you. And I think that comes with, I guess, age and experience. And in my case, you've got about a decade to go if your kids are 8. My son's out of the house. I just have 1 child, and I don't really say no to my husband because I don't have to. He's a great guy. So it's, what are you questioning? What are you saying no to? And I think what Patrice said, I'll just say to my family, I don't have the bandwidth for that right now, but even if it's a conversation, but I can talk to you tomorrow, or somebody asked me to be on a board, or somebody asked me to take on something. Right now I don't have the bandwidth, but I'm interested, and I'd like to talk to you about it later. It's I think it's a great way to handle it. And you'll get better at it once you start doing it.
Well, it's also a great way to potentially put other people, connect people. So I'm buried right now, but I've got a great person that might be able to help you and expand your network and put people together. And I've got people that call me all the time and say, listen, I can't do this. Can you jump in and help with this? And I do the same. I can't right now, but hey, can I put you in touch with this person? So always have a nice network of people and have people that you can try and hand things off to when you're too busy. You can't do everything and be everything for everyone.
So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you having us. Thank you, and have a great day.